Demonic Detours into Adjacent Absurdities. The Siren Call of Hungry Ghosts. Joe Fisher's The Siren Call of Hungry Ghosts reveals one of the most documented accounts of a personal investigation into channeling deceptions that I've come across. Fisher wasn't some Christian apologist approaching New Age lore with a predetermined skepticism. He was such a New Ager himself that he wrote an entire book 9 years before this called The Case for Reincarnation. He was an experienced investigative journalist and enthusiastically participating in channeling sessions in a friend group for years, who spent it developing relationships with spirit guides before his journalistic instincts compelled him to verify the information these entities were feeding him. His discoveries shattered his trust in his longtime spirit homies and exposed systematic deception at the core of the channeling industry, and ultimately may have led to his death. His story is additional validation of everything we've documented about demonic manipulation and a warning about the dangers of engaging these entities even when attempting to expose them. Fisher's investigation began in the early 1980s when he joined a channeling group in Toronto, led by Aviva Nesher, a trance medium who learned she could easily channel multiple entities. The group consisted of formally educated professional homies, psychologists, teachers, business people, etc. They gathered regularly to receive guidance from a council of spirit guides claiming to be enlightened beings with humanity's best interests at heart. The entities presented themselves as highly evolved souls who had lived previous incarnations on Earth and were now employed from the spirit realm to assist humans in their spiritual development. Fisher became particularly attached to his personal guide, a lady spirit claiming to be Philippa, a beautiful, allegedly, young Greek woman who had lived in Alexandropolis, Greece, during the late 1700s and died tragically young. Philippa told Fisher with extensive details about her supposed past life, with names of family members, specific locations, historical events she witnessed, personal memories filled with emotional depth that made her feel very real and genuinely caring about Fisher's well-being. Just good vibes, super chill, but too chill perhaps. Over time, Fisher developed deep emotional connection to Philippa, who claimed to be his lover in one of his past lives with her. He becomes emotionally dependent, meditating daily for mind-to-mind contact and consulting her on major decisions, which strains his real-world relationships. Multiple entities would speak through Aviva during weekly sessions, each with distinct personalities, voices, and areas of expertise. They provided life advice, spiritual teachings, predictions about personal circumstances, and cosmological lore about the nature of reality that aligned with New Age theology like reincarnation, karma, consciousness evolution, radar adara. Fisher's journalistic background eventually compelled him to do what basically every channeling enthusiast never attempts: to verify the specific factual claims the entities made about their supposed past lives. The entities had provided endless details to pull from that should be verifiable through historical records, parish registries, census data, and local histories. Fisher traveled to England and Greece to research the claims made by Philippa and other guides who had shared detailed information about their relatively recent earthly incarnations. All Fisher covered for each entity was systematic fraud. Philippa had claimed she lived in a specific town in Greece during the late 1700s, provided names of family members, described local landmarks, and shared personal memories about her life and death. Fisher traveled to the town, searched parish records, examined census data, investigated local histories, and consulted with genealogical experts. He found no record of Philippa's existence in any documentation from the period. Family members she named didn't exist in local records. Places she described didn't match historical reality of the town, and historical events she claimed to witness either didn't occur or occurred differently than she described. In general, personal details about her life contradicted known facts about the period. Fisher realized that Philippa wasn't just mistaken or confused, but the entire biography was fabricated. Either the entity was never who she claimed, or, more depressing, she never existed as a human at all, and the entire personality was constructed specifically to manipulate and appeal to Fisher. Another entity called Russell claimed to have lived in Yorkshire, England during the 1800s and provided specific details about his life as a sheep farmer and his military service and death. Fisher's research revealed that Russell's timeline contained incompatibilities. He claimed to have participated in military campaigns that occurred in different years than his stated birth and death dates would align with, described historical events he couldn't have witnessed based on when he claimed to be alive, and referenced people and places with details that didn't match historical records. And a guide named Ernest claimed multiple past incarnations and shared details about each. Fisher discovered that Ernest's various life stories contradicted each other. Dates didn't align, geographic details were inaccurate, and historical context he described didn't match reality. Fisher returns and confronts these self-proclaimed discarnate helpers about these contradictions during a channeling session in front of the squad. The bulk of the confrontation is between him and Russell, as Philippa refuses to manifest at all, with Russell claiming she has been shut out by Fisher and lacks the energy to respond due to his skepticism. He additionally responds to the accusations defensively with evasion, rhetorical deflection, and empty metaphysical word salads. Russell dismisses the contradictions as superficial and reframes the issue as Fisher's failure to look inward or trust blindly like religious faith. Insists guides can't be proven on the earthly plane, and accuses Fisher of distracting from personal growth by excavating trivia. Damn, I should have named this book Goon Realm Gaslighting, but I'm decidedly buzzword averse. Group members defend Russell with flawed analogies. Not finding a house doesn't mean it never existed, helping him regain control. Russell returns to a professorial, patient demeanor, positioning himself as a tolerant teacher dealing with a stubborn student, while urging openness and claiming to want an ongoing friendship. Overall, the guides argue and make excuses without addressing the lies substantively, using subtle manipulation and group dynamics to avoid accountability. Keep in mind, it's a room of institutionally educated New Agers in the 80s. There isn't much hope for Joe to win them over. This experience gives Fisher no reason to deny that the entities are not benevolent guides, but deceptive, hungry ghosts, earthbound, lower astral beings, or lost souls exploiting the living spheres and desires for control. And he breaks away from the group, warning of the dangers in channeling practices. He frames them as dark and tricky intelligences, from the lower astral realm, lost souls, neurotic entities or parasites that impersonate benevolent guides to feed on human energies, manipulate through deceit, and create dependency. He refers to various sources, Emanuel Swedenborg's warnings about evil seducing spirits that subtly infuse evil. Dr. Carl Wickland's view of earthbound spirits as devils of human origin born from selfishness, and Gnostic ideas of archons as masters of deception, to suggest they are more like vampiric, troubled human remnants as opposed fallen angels or Nephilim spirits. So close, Joe. You almost had it. Though he does add that he is convinced that no benevolent being would ever possess, even temporarily, another's physical body for any reason, diverting heavily from the frameworks the occult researchers above live by. So we're getting somewhere. But Fisher never publicly doubted the cosmology itself that these beings reported. As Fisher compiled evidence, he realized the guides weren't simply making occasional mistakes or experiencing the memory limitations one might expect from disembodied souls trying to remember earthly lives from centuries past. They were systematically fabricating identities with enough surface detail to sound convincing during channeling sessions, but falling apart completely when subjected to historical verification. This pattern indicates the entities possess broad historical knowledge, easily accessible to beings who've observed human civilization across centuries, but fabricate specific personal identities rather than representing actual deceased humans. Is it possible this is a part of the universal laws they follow, where they're not allowed to directly impersonate a real person, and must leave these clues hoping and assuming they won't be investigated? It's that, or they are sloppier than we think. But due to the consistency presented in all of these adjacent cases, I lean towards the former explanation. Fisher also discovered that many guides across different mediums and channeling groups told suspiciously similar stories, like guides claiming to be ancient Egyptians, Greek philosophers, Arthurian knights, or other romantic historical figures, all with vague details that sounded impressive, but couldn't be verified. The entities were drawing from a common pool of appealing historical archetypes, rather than representing genuine variety of human lives. The book presented systematic evidence that entities routinely fabricate their claimed identities with details that sound convincing, but don't hold up to historical verification. The historical details entities provide are typically generic enough to sound authentic, but vague enough to avoid specific verification. These entities will become evasive or hostile when confronted with evidence of deception rather than acknowledging mistakes or providing clarification. The core teachings remain consistent across entities despite fabricated identities. All promote reincarnation, karma, consciousness evolution, and the New Age cosmology, regardless of who they claim to be. His mother, after hearing about the entities, reacts with,
"Demons. You're talking to demons, and I don't like the sound of it one bit,"
attributing this to her years of Christian conditioning. Simultaneously refers to Scripture's undeniable parallels, like Jesus casting out unclean spirits, Deuteronomy condemning consulting familiar spirits as an abomination, Revelation warning of everlasting destruction from Spiritism, and 2 Corinthians describing Satan masquerading as an angel of light with agents posing as good. Prophets and Jesus, he notes, had nothing good to say about communication with the dead. Fisher's work ironically validated what Christian spiritual warfare theology has always taught, that entities presenting themselves as spirit guides, ascended masters, or deceased souls are deceptive beings using false identities to gain human trust and promote anti-biblical cosmologies. The fact that an experienced investigative journalist using serious methodology reached these conclusions through empirical investigation, rather than theological commitment, makes his testimony much more powerful. On May 9th, 2001, Joe Fisher died after falling from a cliff near his home in Ontario. The death was ruled either accidental or suicide. Authorities never determined with certainty whether Fisher jumped, slipped, or was somehow compelled to walk off the cliff. He was 53 years old and had been experiencing depression and anxiety in the months leading to his death. Those familiar with Fisher's work and the dangers of engaging demonic entities cannot help but see suspicious circumstances surrounding his death. Fisher had spent years in close relationship with entities who presented themselves as benevolent guides, developed deep emotional attachments to these beings, then exposed their deception and warned others to avoid them. Despite his newfound awareness, he was ultimately misguided still and never obtained any protection from the spiritual warfare due to his lack faith in Christ. Maybe if he had chosen the Christian path and gotten deliverance, he would have closed the doors that were left open all those years, changing his course in life. The last oracle of Delphi. Then there is the last oracle of Delphi story, referring to a prophetic utterance delivered around 362 AD during the reign of Roman Emperor Julian, 361 to 363 AD, often called Julian the Apostate for his rejection of Christianity and efforts to revive traditional Greco-Roman paganism. Julian was raised as a Christian but converted to paganism in secret, and desired to restore the old gods amid Christianity's growing dominance under previous emperors like Constantine and Constantius II. As part of this revival, he sent his trusted physician and quaestor Oribasius to Delphi to restore the Temple of Apollo and reactivate its oracle, which had fallen into disuse. The sanctuary at Delphi, once the epicenter of pagan prophecy, had declined due to Christian influence, Roman plundering, by Sulla in 86 BC and Nero in 66 AD, and a general shift away from pagan practices. Delphi's oracle, delivered through the priestess and medium Pythia, was traditionally seen by pagans as the voice of Apollo, aka Phoebus. By the 4th century AD, oracles were relatively sporadic, and Christians like Eusebius and Augustine argued that pagan gods were demons whose power waned with Christ's arrival. Julian's consultation was a desperate attempt to legitimize his anti-Christian policies, but the response he received via Oribasius marked the symbolic end of Delphic prophecy.
"Tell the Emperor that the Daedalic Hall has fallen to the ground. Phoebus no longer has his chamber, nor the prophetic laurel, nor the speaking spring. The murmuring water has been silenced."
The Daedalic Hall refers to the ornate temple of Apollo at Delphi, mythically built by Daedalus, or in a Daedalic style, with intricate craftsmanship. It symbolizes the sanctuary's physical and spiritual ruin. Phoebus, another name for Apollo, god of prophecy. Prophetic laurel. laurel leaves were chewed by the medium or used in rituals to induce trances. Speaking spring, likely the Castalian spring, whose waters were believed to inspire prophecy. Its silence signifies the end of divine utterances. It was the final recorded response from Delphi. No further oracles are documented, and Emperor Theodosius I banned pagan practices in 391 to 392 AD, leading to the temple's destruction in 390 AD. The oracle's ambiguity allowed for varied interpretations, but its core message, the end of prophecy, caters more to one ideology. Pagans might have viewed it as a marketing tactic or plea for imperial funding to revive the site, reflecting Delphi's decline. However, Christians overwhelmingly interpreted it as an unwitting confession by the supposed demon behind Apollo, exposing the deceptive nature of pagan oracles and lack of power they have, especially in an increasingly Christian community. Some modern scholars and even ancient skeptics suspect the oracle was a Christian invention by Philostorgius or later writers to propagandize paganism's defeat. Yet the correlating historical events surrounding it and the lack of continuous oracles after this align with the idea that this was a genuine event. On a related note, in The Vision and the Voice, Aleister Crowley quotes a demon he channeled that claimed it defeated Judaism and secular Christianity. However, it also prophesied its own defeat against the God-bearing elders and saints.
I have prevailed against the kingdom of the Father and befouled his beard, and I have prevailed against the kingdom of the Son and torn off his phallus, but against the kingdom of the Holy Ghost shall I strive and not prevail.
Elemental folklore from Paracelsus. There is much lore around the mythology of elemental spirits, largely originating and popularized from the works of Paracelsus, Theophrastus von Hohenheim, 1493 to 1541, a Swiss alchemist and philosopher in the 16th century. Though many cultures have similar beings, like nymphs in Greek mythology or kami in Shinto, tied to natural features. He discusses these beings in multiple books, but largely concentrated to his posthumously published work, a book on nymphs, sylphs, pygmies, and salamanders, and on the other spirits, 1566. His ideas stem from a supposed Christian cosmology, blending mysticism with the observations and testimonies of many people he interviewed who claimed to interact with these beings, while admittedly never having his own encounter. Paracelsus's elemental spirits have heavily influenced many fantasy fiction genres by providing a systematic mythology of nature beings. Elemental spirits are supposed supernatural beings associated with the classical elements, earth, water, air, and fire, in various spiritual, mythological, and esoteric traditions. They are typically depicted as personifications or guardians of natural forces, embodying the essence of their elements. The concept appears in folklore, alchemy, and occult practices, particularly in Western esotericism. Elementals are invoked in rituals, meditation, or magic in systems like Hermeticism or Wicca, often as guides or forces to balance. They are described as neither fully physical nor fully non-physical, but something in between, sometimes visible in visions or dreams. They are neither inherently good nor evil, acting according to their elements' qualities. In contemporary spirituality, elemental spirits are often viewed as archetypes or energies one can connect with for personal growth, creativity, or environmental harmony. Some see them as metaphors for natural forces, while others believe they're literal entities. Paracelsus pushed the latter viewpoint and had a number of things to say about them that, when viewed in context of many of these adjacent topics, seems to be another masquerade for these dark spirits, albeit a much older one than some of the examples presented in this book. The elemental lore isn't executed and maintained widely anymore, likely because of its lack of cultural connections in the modern technological era, shifting their psyops according to the current state of culture. Here are some short descriptions of the various beings. Earth, gnomes associated with soil, rocks, and minerals, often depicted as small sturdy beings who guard treasures where they live underground. They can create money or gems. Water, undines or naiads, linked to rivers, lakes, and seas, portrayed as fluid, graceful, sexy entities tied to emotions and intuition. Also represents mermaids. Air, sylphs, connected to the sky, wind, and clouds, described as ethereal, invisible beings associated with intellect and freedom. Fire, salamanders tied to flames and heat, seen as fiery, transformative spirits, symbolizing passion and energy, more prone to demonic possession or witchcraft associations. Elementals have bodies composed of their respective elements, making them tangible in a sense, but not of Adam's flesh, human matter. They are visible or perceptible under specific conditions, such as in dreams, visions, or to those with spiritual sensitivity, yet they lack the dense materiality of humans. Paracelsus calls their substance subtle or spiritual, suggesting they occupy a liminal state between corporeal and incorporeal. They are allegedly not pure spirits like angels or demons. He positions them as intermediaries between the divine/spiritual realm and the physical world, embodying the spirit of their element. Elementals are real in that they have agency and presence in nature, but their existence is less bound by physical laws than humans, making them quasi-physical entities. They are described as beings lacking the human-created triune body, soul, spirit, such as God's image, Father God, Son Jesus, and Holy Spirit, leaving them with just their ethereal body and spirit, akin to animals of the earth with just body and spirit. He even describes them in a cosmological sense as a beast, yet higher than a beast. But they talk and laugh like man. He says they can become sick just like us, weave clothing. Also, their customs and behavior are human, having their own governments. They are witty, rich, clever, poor, dumb, act, resembling us in every way. Obviously differing vastly in many areas, one of seeming importance is their lack of ability to procreate with their own kind, but only can do so with man, aside from the salamander type for some reason, and gnomes only on occasion. On a totally unrelated note, according to Paracelsus, these elementals desire eternal life, requiring a soul, and have one method of obtaining a soul for themselves. When an elemental marries a human being, the elemental then receives a soul, and the children they have with the human lover will be born with one as well. But when they entered into a union with man, then the union gives the soul. It is the same as a union that man has with God, and God with man. The early Rosicrucians would often commit themselves to a vow of chastity for the sole purpose, pun intended, of marrying an elemental. Paracelsus then goes on to tie in Christianity claiming Jesus came and died for those who have a soul, those of Adam, as opposed to those not from Adam. His sacrifice, therefore, has no effect on them.
From this it follows that they woo man, and that they seek him assiduously and in secret. A heathen begs for baptism, and woos it in order to acquire his soul, and to become alive in Christ. In the same way, they seek love with man, so as to be in union with men. With them all intelligence and wisdom are outside the qualities of the soul, and not the soul, and so they receive the soul, and their children also. By virtue of Adam's fruit, freedom and power, which holds and carries them to God.
Paracelsus says all they need to do is marry a human to get to God, and they get to go to heaven, which negates the peace of what he just said, becoming alive in Christ as a man would when he gives his life to Christ. Then his soul becomes alive. Well, that doesn't make any sense. They also know all future affairs, present affairs, and the past, which are not apparent, but are hidden, in that they can serve man, protect, warn, guide him, and such like. For they have reason in common with man, except in regard to the soul. They have knowledge and intelligence of the Spirit, except in regard to God. Thus they are highly gifted, and they know and warn, so that man may learn about such things, and see them, and believe in such creatures. For this purpose God has let them appear to man, that he may seek knowledge, and learn what God effects in such creatures. Knowledge of past and future, guides of men, seeking knowledge. No soul. Golly, I feel like I've heard this one before.
They are often found with old women, however, that is, with witches, wooing them. One also must know that the devil takes possession of them, just as he does of men, and thus goes around with them, appearing to the people in the features just mentioned. And this leads and brings them to the witches, and many such matters that happen when things are possessed by the devil. But it would be much too long to describe them here. You must know, however, that there is danger with the fire people, because they are commonly possessed, and the devil thus rages in them, which causes great harm to man. Know also that he equally takes possession of the mountain people, and thus makes them subservient to him, and of the forest people also. He then can be found in the forest possessing sylphs, and venturing to make love to women who live in forest regions. But they all become like lepers, scabby and mangy, and there is no help for them either. When these beings are not possessed by the devil, they are human and seek union as has been mentioned. But they keep the way of spirits in that they disappear.
Oh, and by the way, the fire elementals are commonly possessed by demons, spending quality time with old witches. Oh yeah, and the mountain dwellers. Just as frequently, actually. Wait, almost forgot the forest dudes. Yeah, they're also often vessels for demons. My bad. I'm actually so overloaded with testimonies of these elemental demonic possessions that I am overwhelmed at the idea of sharing any of the specifics to the lore. But also, I really like these etheric dudes for the most part. Marrying them sounds appropriate and not desirable, so I don't want to mess up my chances by being responsible for any interdimensional racism. Also, I personally recommend marrying a gnome person over the technically hotter elementals. These guys create money out of thin air, just a regular embodied Federal Reserve type spirit being kind of the ultimate sugar daddy, since you don't ever really have to touch him. Now, we know that these beings can marry us humans, but at least tell me we can just as easily divorce. Paracelsus essentially advises the reader and potential interdimensional spouse not to get in a fight with their mermaid wife near a body of water. Don't get in a fight with your gnome husband in his region either, because your mermaid wife might get mad and jump into the water, and you'll never see them again. But this still leaves you legally bound to them, as these marriages are valid as long as the partners are alive. So you can never remarry another, thus not ending the elemental's obtainment of a soul and eternal life. If a man decides to bypass this law, he pays with his own life. There's a recounting of a man's story named Stauffenberg who married a water woman, eventually began to consider her a devil, marrying another woman later. Therefore, at the wedding, she gave him the sign, through the ceiling, during the banquet, and 3 days later, he was dead.
We must pay equally great attention to Melusine, for she was not what the theologians considered her, but a nympha. It is true, however, that she was possessed by the evil spirit, of which she would have freed herself if she had stayed with her husband to the end. For such is the devil that he transforms these beings into different shapes, as he also does with the witches, transforming them into cats and werewolves, dogs, etc. This happened to her also, for she never was free of witchcraft, but had a part in it. A superstitious belief resulted that on Saturdays she had to be a serpent. Mind you, she remained the same serpent to the end of her life, and God knows how long it lasted. Thus these beings are warnings to us, to make us understand what we are on earth, and in what strange ways the devil deals with us and is after us in every corner.
Hey bro, yeah, I get it. She's a demonically possessed mermaid spirit who occasionally shapeshifts into various cryptids. Whatever. But dude, that's your freaking wife. You made a vow, and honestly, she's pretty hot. You sound ungrateful. If I haven't alluded loudly enough, I will be more direct and say that these have all of the markings of deceptive nitwits, trying to marry aka merge and possess willing participants, just branded as a more romanticized and poetic psyop than some of the other work they do. Their children with humans are endowed with a soul, the hybrid Nephilim, and unless they are saved and redeemed by diverting from the herd as a fallen angel's proxy, which is biblical in my opinion, watch Free the Rabbit's Good Nephilim series. Then their soul is banished to the intermediary zone on Earth until Judgment Day. Paracelsus' Folklore on Giants. The giants come from the forest people and the dwarfs from the earth mannequins. They are monstral like the sirens from the nymphs. Thus these beings are born, and although it happens rarely, yet it happens so often and under such marvelous circumstances that their existence is well known and remembered. Unlike biblical giants, whom he views as oversized humans from Adam's seed, elemental giants are extra-human anomalies. Giants are not a primary elemental category, but are treated as rare monsters, born from sylphs, akin to deformities in nature. They lack souls, are infertile beyond 1 generation. Yeah, that makes sense.
They are monsters. Just as 2 perfectly normal human parents can give birth to a monster, so do the elemental beings. Thus, the sirens are monsters of the water people, the giants of the sylphs, the dwarfs of the pygmies, and the will-o'-the-wisps of the salamanders. Like human monsters, they occur rarely, and their kind dies out soon. They are abnormal happenings like comets and earthquakes, and their appearance signifies impending disaster. Know that such people, giants and dwarfs, may well make women from Adam pregnant, because same likes to meet same, and nature may permit it. Yet you must know that the monsters are not fertile. Although they are monsters only so far as their strength and size is concerned, they are not misbuilt, but they have only 1 seed available. That is, they do not attain the 3rd, 4th, etc. generation. Know also that when they get into man's kind, the result is uncertain. If the child's body takes after the mother, it falls into her kind. If not, it becomes a beast like the father.
Paracelsus is describing exactly what Genesis 6 documents, non-human entities breeding with human women to produce hybrid offspring, but reframing it through occult naturalist language that makes it sound like biological curiosity, rather than spiritual abomination. His claim that elementals, Dweebs, can impregnate human women and produce giants, dwarfs, and other monsters that die out quickly validates the Nephilim narrative while masking the demonic source, which is again vastly different than the channeled law's explanations. Paracelsus frames these hybrids as rare natural anomalies comparable to comets and earthquakes, as opposed to coordinated spiritual warfare. By framing demon-human breeding as occasional biological kink fulfillment instead of deliberate corruption, his claim that these hybrids signify impending disaster is the half-truth element. These beings are harbingers of judgment, exactly as the Genesis 6 Nephilim were the reason God brought the flood. But he buries this warning under a naturalist classification. Paracelsus claims these hybrids are not fertile beyond one generation, so don't worry about them multiplying. A self-correcting problem. Yet we have documented bloodlines with predispositions to spiritual sensitivity/psychic abilities, and multi-generational abduction patterns suggesting that bloodlines persists, not just a one-and-done slam-bam thank ya ma'am. His description of hybrid offspring becoming beasts like the father, if they don't lean towards the mother's genetics, contradicts his earlier claim that they're not misbuilt. You can't simultaneously argue they're physically normal and admit they can turn into literal friggin' beasts. This is typical occult obfuscation. Provide enough contradictory detail that readers assume complexity equals truth, while missing that the entire framework is incoherent, if not retarded. Additionally, Paracelsus treats this phenomenon as neutral observation of natural law. Same likes to meet same, and nature may permit it, when Scripture clearly condemns it as the most severe crime and rebellion requiring divine judgment. By naturalizing demon-human breeding as rare anomaly of elemental biology, he removes the underlying moral implications and spiritual warfare context, making readers curious about elementals rather than spooked and angry by the demonic entities corrupting humanity's bloodline. This is the exact strategy modern alien abduction narratives use, repackaging demonic assault as scientific phenomenon worthy of neutral study, as opposed to spiritual warfare requiring deliverance. Egregore law. Egregore? An egregore is a concept rooted in occultism, esotericism, and some philosophical non-Christian traditions, describing a collective psychic entity or thought form that manifests from the shared thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and intentions of a person or group of people. It is often portrayed as an autonomous being or force that gains independence from its creators, influencing the group's behavior, decisions, and even external events. The term originates from ancient Greek, meaning watcher or guardian, and was popularized in the 19th century by figures like Eliphas Levi in Western occultism. Egregores can be benevolent, such as those formed by religious congregations or national identities fostering unity, or malevolent, acting as self-fulfilling guiding forces of collective disharmony or war. Once formed, an egregore is believed to sustain itself through the ongoing energy of its contributors, potentially outliving the original group if not consciously dismantled. In modern context, the idea of egregores has extended beyond mysticism into psychology, sociology, and memetics, where it parallels concepts like collective consciousness or viral ideas that take on a life of their own. You could have a corporation, political movement or online community develop egregores that shape cultural norms and individual actions, often without members' full awareness. Critics view it as a metaphor for groupthink, while advocates in spiritual practices see it as a literal astral entity that can be invoked or banished through rituals. The latter highlight the power and potential dangers of shared ideologies. The egregore concept is spiritualists' attempt to naturalize demonic manifestation through word salads borrowed from collective psychology. When advocates claim an egregore is a literal astral entity that can be invoked or banished through rituals, they're describing exactly what demons do. They manifest in response to human intention and belief, gain autonomy from their creators, and influence behavior while disguising themselves as products of collective consciousness rather than independent malevolent intelligences. The genius of the egregore concept is that it removes moral accountability. If your political movement develops a problematic egregore causing increasingly aggressive behavior among members, that's not demonization of group consciousness. That's just an emergent property of shared ideology that took on a life of its own. Literal or metaphorical, doesn't matter. This reframing allows people to participate in increasingly destructive collective movements while maintaining plausible deniability that they're inviting demonic influence. They're just contributing to a thought form. They're just adding their energy to a collective consciousness. They're just participating in shared intention. But the result, an autonomous entity gaining power from group belief, influencing members toward increasingly darker actions, sustaining itself through ongoing psychological investment, is identical to demonization applied to groups rather than individuals. By declaring these entities as thought forms created by human belief rather than as independent NHI choosing to manifest in similar ways across thousands of people, the egregore framework removes agency from the demonic and places it on humans, a half-truth, making practitioners feel powerful. We created this through our intention, while keeping them blind to the fact that they're being orchestrated by entities with greater power and intelligence. The beings don't care what humans call them: egregores, archetypal forces, collective consciousnesses, aliens, ascended masters, or spirit guides. Regardless of name, the mechanism is unfazed. Demons reading human consciousness, manifesting in forms matching human expectations and desires, gaining access through willingness to add energy to collective thought forms, and coordinating their influence toward the same theological agenda across billions of people. The egregore lore is just the latest linguistic costume demons wear to hide in plain sight. Hathor lore. Hathor? Chris Bledsoe, a UFO experiencer and author of UFO of God, describes multiple encounters starting in 2007. But his pivotal meeting with the lady occurred on Easter 2012. He associates her with Hathor, a benevolent feminine entity who appeared as a glowing blonde figure, accompanied by orbs and a translucent bull. Bledsoe claims she provided prophecies about global events, healing, and a new age around 2026 to 2027. At this encounter, he was also granted permission to film them, orbs, to validate his story, which he previously failed at since 2007. His case has attracted attention from NASA, CIA, and Vatican investigators due to its mix of UFO phenomena and divine messaging. Apparently, they even have a movie in the works. From his 2012 hypnotic regression with Barbara Lamb, Bledsoe recalls being transported by seraphim-like beings to meet her.
I am the mother of the Word. I come to reassure you, for I've heard your prayers. You are faithful, but many do not understand. Pray for them.
Who are you? What do you want?
I am Hathor, the lady. I bring peace and guidance. There will be trials, a river of blood if hearts do not turn, but love will prevail. Share this joy, warn of the coming changes.
Bledsoe describes her as radiant, maternal, and telepathic, filling him, gross, with overwhelming love. In later interviews, he elaborates.
She showed me Egypt's sacred sites like the pyramids and said she's been known by many names: Mary, Isis, the Divine Mother, adapting to cultures.
He credits her with healing him, his family, and thwarting threats, including an alleged assassination attempt on the Pope in 2015. Since he came out as an experiencer, Bledsoe claims UFO/orb phenomena are linked to a collective consciousness akin to a wireless internet of divine information influenced by solar green light and ATP in living organisms. He rejects traditional alien abduction narratives, insisting these are multidimensional angelic beings connected to God, not extraterrestrials, aligning with Stephen Greer on the idea that they are all benevolent helpers of humanity, while distancing himself from the countless claims of malevolent encounters. This New Age Christian fusion includes claims of remote viewing, PSI abilities, and predictions of a 2026 spiritual awakening or Christ's return. Alfonsina Mumureke was a 17-year-old student at the College of St. Pierre Claver in Kibeho, a remote hilltop village in southwestern Rwanda. She was known among her peers as devout and prayerful. On November 28, 1981, Alphonsine heard a calm yet insistent voice calling her name. Startled, she stepped into the adjacent hallway, where a radiant cloud began to form mid-air, eventually morphing into the luminous figure of a tall, graceful woman, dressed in flowing white robes, her hands extended in blessing. Alphonsine, trembling with awe, fell to her knees and asked, "Who are you?" "I am the mother of the Word. What do you want or prefer of religion?" Alphonsine responded without hesitation, "I love God and his mother, who gave us a child who saves us. It is thus that I come to reassure you, for I've heard your prayers." She smiled and extended her hands, as if inviting Alphonsine into an embrace. "I have come because you are faithful, but many of your companions do not yet understand. Pray for them, that they may open their hearts." She then shared prophecies of trials and rivers of blood if her people do not repent. Over the following weeks, the lady returned to Alphonsine multiple times. These early visions set the stage for appearances with two other students, Natalie Mukamazimpaka and Marie-Claire Mukangango, confirming the authenticity to the growing crowds. Nancy B. Price recounts channeling Hathor as a benevolent guide during a spiritual awakening. Hathor represents benevolence, receptivity, feminine energy. She came to me in a dream, teaching about conception and creation. Reported dialogue.
Open your heart to receive. I am the giver of joy and life. Let my energy flow through you.
How do I embody this?
Through music, dance, and love. Nurture as I nurture the world.
Ancient Jinn as Astral Guides. In Ibn Taymiyyah's essay on the Jinn, he discusses instances where Jinn, referred to as devils or shayateen in these contexts, transport humans to holy places like Mount Arafat or Makkah. Devils, Jinn, attach to the individual, often during states of altered consciousness. This attachment allows the Jinn to carry the person physically or illusionary to sacred sites. Taymiyyah notes,
"The devils are attached to them and enter the fire with them, and sometimes they will levitate and move with him in the sky. But what is really taking place is that the devil is attached to him alongside his mind being absent." In the context of sacred sites, this extends to being actually carried by the devils to Arafat and other sacred places.
Taymiyyah distinguishes these from mere sleight-of-hand tricks, deceptive states without devils, by noting they involve genuine supernatural aid from jinn, but the end result is deceptive because it bypasses obligatory religious rites. The transported individuals believe, or are convinced, they have performed sacred acts like standing at Arafat during Hajj, which is a key pillar of the pilgrimage. However, the experience is invalid and deceptive because essential rituals are omitted, making it appear as a divine favor when it's satanic. Taymiyyah explains,
In such cases, they pass the miqat, boundaries that may not be crossed while on Hajj around Makkah, without formally entering the state of Ihram, or performing many of the obligatory rites of Hajj like making the talbiyah, chant of response to God's call, or circulating, the Kaaba, and walking between the mounts of Safa and Marwa.
I'm not trying to stress you honkies out with scary foreign words, but essentially the jinn are, making it seem like a miracle, as if God is granting the person a special spiritual experience. But it's important to note this is a scam because the person skips critical steps of the pilgrimage. So it doesn't count as a valid religious act according to their own belief system. These deceptions often happen during questionable spiritual activities, like intense mystical chanting or trance-like states, Sama'a or Wajd, in some Sufi or heretical groups. The jinn exploit these moments to attach to people and create fake miracles, thus encouraging more of these un-Islamic practices. This keeps people hooked on rituals that open the door to jinn influence, pulling them further from proper worship. Adjacent testimonies in Taymiyyah's essay of these demonically aided miracles are in India and the Maghreb. Groups like the Zabt, Jat, perform feats like burning in fire or levitating. The sweets were requested from the mystic Al-Hallaj, but a devil stole them from a shop in Yemen and delivered them instantly. A man was carried by devils from Salihiyah mountain to nearby villages, appearing out of the air and entering the windows of houses to demonstrate miraculous entrance. This was done for show, with the person's mind absent, similar to sacred site carryings. There are references to jinn transporting people through closed doors or city gates with illusory lights or calls, which can be halted by Ayat al-Kursi, powerful Islamic prayer known for its spiritual significance. This heavily parallels UFO abduction testimonies. Zulu rain goddess searching for man-lover. Zulu culture of South Africa has the legend of the rain goddess Mbaba Mwana Waresa, who is said to be capable of shape-shifting, and she can influence the dreams of us mortals. Unable to find a suitable husband among the various sky gods, she searched the lands of southern Africa in search of a human husband. Mbaba appeared in the dreams of the man she chose, where she professed her love for him. But before the two could be together, she first needed to test his devotion to her. So, the rain goddess dressed a beautiful young girl in the costume of a Zulu bride to accompany her when she went to the chosen man's marriage hut, to see if he would recognize that this was not the woman from his dreams. The rain goddess and the fake bride descended from the sky on a glimmering beam of colorful light, where the groom-to-be was anxiously waiting Mbaba's arrival. Two women emerged, Mbaba, Moana Waresa, disguised in ragged zebra skin, ashes giving her a pale grey cast, and rags, and the beautiful Nomalanga, adorned as a Zulu bride in beads, gold, and shells. There, the rain goddess proclaimed, "This is the beautiful being you saw in your dream." The man looked at the girl and back to the rain goddess, recognizing her piercing eyes from his earlier visions. He said, "No, this girl is not my bride. You are my bride." Proving his devotion to true essence over appearance, he passed the test. Joyous wedding rites ensued. Villagers feasted, danced, and celebrated the union of heaven and earth. The two lovers then ascended into the sky, as the man returned to live with the rain goddess in her heavenly home. Now, with all oral legends passed down, they are subject to potential embellishments and alterations in detail over time, but this story largely falls in line with much of what's possible in our current reality. Just told from a more mythological perspective, embedding a lesson that may or may not have present in whatever the original event was, if any took place. A modern analysis would lead me to conclude that this could be a sanitized mythological retelling of an abduction/spiritual contact experience involving demonic shape-shifting and dream manipulation. The core elements match patterns throughout this book. An entity appearing in dreams, professing love/devotion, presenting multiple forms to test discernment, descending on glimmering beam of colorful light, matching UFO/angelic descriptions, and ultimately securing the human through emotional manipulation and perceived spiritual elevation. The test itself, recognizing the true essence beneath appearance, mirrors how demons operate across all phenomena. They present false forms while the real entity watches to see if you'll recognize them despite the deception. The man's reward for loyalty is being taken to live with the rain goddess in her heavenly home, essentially being removed from Earth into a non-physical realm, which could represent anything from abduction to spiritual possession to interdimensional bonding. What's revealing is how the legend frames this as happy ending, with the manipulated victim framed as a lucky guy for scoring goddess Kuta. It's a union celebrated by the village, transforming what could be interpreted as demonic seduction and kidnapping into romantic myth about devotion and heavenly reward. This shows how cultures across the globe have documented encounters with shape-shifting entities that blur the line between divine and demonic, and how oral tradition has either sanitized these accounts into fairy tales or recontextualized them through whatever mythological framework made them comprehensible and less terrifying. The Zulu may have witnessed genuine abduction or spiritual contact, but converting it into rain goddess seeking human husband makes it manageable, if not beautiful, rather than acknowledging it as potential demonic manipulation of a vulnerable, horny man. Never donate your organs. In the spring of 1988, 47-year-old ballet dancer Claire Sylvia suffered from primary pulmonary hypertension that left her with failing lungs, a weakened heart, and a complementary negative attitude. She underwent the first heart-lung transplant in New England at Yale New Haven Hospital on May 29th, receiving the harvested organs from 18-year-old Tim LaMiranda, who had died in a motorcycle accident. Following the surgery, Sylvia experienced a specific list of changes, including sudden cravings for beer, chicken nuggets, green peppers, and junk food, items she previously disliked, as well as an attraction to curvy blondes, relatable, a more assertive personality, dragged her feet weird, increased desire for speed and action, and at least lessened feelings of loneliness. She also had vivid dreams of a young man named Tim L. kissing her, feeling as though their spirits merged. After identifying her donor through a nurse's inadvertent disclosure and an obituary, Sylvia contacted her dream boyfriend's family, who verified Tim's fondness for chicken nuggets. Found in his pocket at the time of death, mega cool move, beer, green peppers, and motorcycles, details she documented in her 1997 memoir, A Change of Heart, while consulting open-minded scientists who suggested cellular memory as a possible explanation. Another story of an unnamed 8-year-old girl suffering from cardiomyopathy received a heart transplant from a 10-year-old girl who had been murdered. Post-transplant, the girl began having recurring nightmares of the murder, vividly describing the time of the crime, the location, the knife used as the weapon, the attacker's physical appearance, the victim's clothing, and even her final words pleading, "Please don't. He's got a gun," despite the actual weapon being a knife. These details almost perfectly match the unsolved case, which led to the girl's psychiatrist to report them to the authorities, which ultimately led to the conviction of the perpetrator. This account was documented by researcher Paul Pearsall in his interviews with 74 transplant recipients, including 23 heart cases, as detailed in his book, The Heart's Code. Though it remains an unverified anecdote and urban legend subject to skepticism and debunking due to lack of specific verifiable evidence like names or dates. Then there's a story of a 47-year-old honky foundry worker and press operator who had been diagnosed with benign myxoma and cardiomyopathy and previously harbored a strong dislike for classical music, received a heart transplant from a 17-year-old black dude violin student who was sadly murdered to death in a drive-by shooting while en route to class, still holding his violin case. After the procedure, this honky developed an intense and unexpected passion for classical music, listening to it constantly despite his prior aversion. After meeting the donor's family, they confirmed the young man's deep love for classical music and his dedication to playing the violin, with no donor information having been disclosed to the recipient beforehand. This case was reported in a 1999 study by psychiatrist Gary Schwartz and colleagues, who documented similar occurrences in 74 transplant patients, 23 of whom were received heart transplants. A 56-year-old college professor diagnosed with atherosclerosis and ischemic heart disease received a heart transplant from a 34-year-old police officer who was fatally blapped in the face while trying to arrest a drug dealer. A few weeks post-surgery, the professor began having intense dreams featuring a sudden flash of light right in my face, followed by glimpses of a figure resembling Jesus immediately beforehand, followed by a sensation of hot, burning pain. When the professor met the donor's wife, she confirmed the circumstances of her husband's death, including the gunshot to the face, and noted that the suspect strongly resembled common depictions of Jesus. This case was reported in a 2000 scientific paper examining personality changes in transplant recipients. Anne-Marie Switzer, a 50-year-old woman with congenital heart disease, underwent a heart transplant in 2016, after which she reported unexpected shifts in her personality and preferences. For example, her previous general ladylike aura transformed from evoking warm, fuzzy, chill vibes to a more logical and factual perception, lacking the previous emotional warmth. Additionally, she developed a sudden craving for pickles on hamburgers, despite previously hating wet cucumbers with a passion. Although she contacted the donor's family anonymously to express gratitude, there was no direct confirmation of these traits matching the donor, though it was aligned with a classic everyday man, and Switzer shared her story in a 2022 CBC radio interview, attributing the changes to her new heart while acknowledging potential alternative explanations like post-trauma emotional shifts. Nah, it's a demon psyop for sure. In examining these transplant cases through the lens of spiritual warfare, it's hard to not see the patterns connected to the entirety of reincarnation lore, following similar patterns which actually waters down reincarnation advocates' arguments of evidence. They claim that one of the main reasons they believe it is not only the shared memories of the dead, but also the personality changes which align with the dead in subtle and major ways. This goes to show just how much of our personality and urges are thanks to our ever-merging attachments versus our true core self. If a transplanted organ can cause such changes in people, how can we trust impressionable children's rapid personality shifts as evidence of reincarnation over demonization to varying degrees? In Claire Sylvia's experience, the sudden onset of cravings for beer, chicken nuggets, and a more aggressive personality, coupled with dreams of merging spirits with Tim, appears crafted to simulate a transfer of the donor's essence, subtly promoting the idea that human identity resides in physical organs rather than the soul. Not to mention the very parallel concept of dream infiltration possibly taking place, harvesting additional consent in the dream realm make-out sessions. If this is truly a demonic psyop, then this perfectly explains her dreams and the usage of Tim's identity. What are the odds her subconscious manifested the dream of a man with the same name she didn't learn of until later? That means it was either the ghost of Tim Dream sexing his organ stealer, Random, or a demonic mask gaining consent to influence her deeper, creating a fun story adding to the long list of adjacent unexplainable phenomenon. Similarly, the unnamed 80-year-old girl's nightmares, detailing an unsolved murder with near exact precision, could represent an external imposing of fabricated visions, not genuine recall, designed to validate the idea of cellular memory and draw in investigators like Paul Pearsall, whose work amplifies these narratives. This psyop extends to the 47-year-old man's newfound passion for classical music, where the racial and cultural mismatch between recipient and donor adds a layer of folksy charm, potentially deceiving observers into believing in a materialistic blending of selves that challenges divine creation of unique individuals. Delving deeper, cases like the 56-year-old professor's visions of a flash of light before burning pain reveal potential death memories of the donor. Just the 8-year-old girl solving a murder case from her recovered memories. Just as the rest of our overall understanding of impressed visions, these aren't just subtle impressions, but involve detailed, overwhelmingly intense and realistic details. But they aren't from a supposed past life, yet hit the same, increasing the skepticism we need to maintain when studying people's powerful spiritual experiences. This concept also sows doubt among broader audiences about the exclusivity of biblical resurrection and afterlife, pushing toward a syncretic worldview where human remnants persist materially. Anne-Marie Switzer's shift to a logical mind without emotional warmth, and of course pickle cravings, might represent how such attachments target core human experiences like affection, reframing them as transplant artifacts to undermine scriptural emphases on heart-centered faith and divine love. Additional layers to these deceptions could include the timing, often post-surgery when immunosuppressants and trauma heighten suggestibility, or the anecdotal verification through families, which creates a false chain of evidence, encouraging researchers to build pseudoscientific understandings that rival eternal spiritual truths. These orchestrated details help to build a cosmology of recycled identities, diverting from the biblical promise of individual judgment and redemption. Legitimate visions from God. In the book Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, a devout Muslim encounters Christianity as a memoir by Nabil Qureshi, a Pakistani-American who grew up in a loving, devout Ahmadi Muslim family, a sect of Islam. The book follows his spiritual journey from being a passionate defender of Islam to converting to Christianity in 2005, despite the immense personal cost, including strained family relationships, his parents' devastation, viewing his choice as betrayal, and cultural alienation. He eventually befriends David Wood, a committed Christian and former atheist, who challenged Qureshi's assumptions about Islam through respectful debates. Qureshi shares how historical evidence, textual analysis, and logical arguments gradually eroded his confidence in Islam. The book is praised for its honesty, cultural insights into Islam, and apologetical value, relaying the high cost of following Jesus in various cultures, something Westerners are only aware of largely on a surface level. After years of debate and research left him convinced of Christianity's truth, but emotionally resistant due to the consequences, he prayed desperately for divine guidance in late 2004. These experiences include an initial vision followed by 3 dreams over several months, which he interprets as God's direct intervention. They were impactful because they addressed his doubt symbolically, aligned with biblical passages he hadn't yet read, and provided confirmations through external sources like dream interpretation books and scripture. Below are details of the most significant ones. In December 19th, 2004, while in a Florida hotel room with his father, Qureshi prayed tearfully for a sign to clarify whether Islam or Christianity was the true path, begging God for a vision, dream, or clear indicator. The room suddenly went pitch black, and the wall he faced transformed into a field of hundreds of glowing crosses, paralyzing him momentarily. Then the vision vanished quickly. Now, while most would find that a satisfying enough answer in a blue ball sort of way, Qureshi initially dismissed it as possibly a trick of the eye or subconscious bias. He said, "Nah, God, give me that hard shit." That doesn't count. God, in his infinite mercy and patience, gives him what he asks for that same night, providing the requested confirmation and launching the sequence of experiences. In this vivid, symbolic dream, a poisonous snake, red and black with white stripes, hissed at oblivious people from a stone perch across a chasm. The scene shifted to a lush garden where a massive iguana, disguised as a hill, deceived people walking on it. A giant boy, symbolizing his friend David Wood, accused the iguana, enraging it to attack. The boy released a huge cricket, which challenged the iguana. As the iguana lunged at Qureshi, now viewing from beneath it, the cricket decapitated the iguana, saving him. Qureshi interpreted the snake as evil influences, the iguana as Islam, ancient and deceptive in his life, the boy as David, calling out Islam, and the cricket as Christianity, ultimately victorious and protective. This reinforced his growing conviction that Islam was misleading, and Christianity was the way. He documented the dream and consulted his parents, who used Ibn Sirin's Islamic dream interpretation book. The symbols matched eerily: snake as a religious questioner, stone pillar as rapid faith change, monitor lizard, similar to iguana, as a hidden enemy that fails when challenged, the boy as a helper for abundant life, and locust, similar enough to a cricket, as a warrior bringing joy. Additionally, the parallels of iguana and Islam, both starting with I, cricket, and Christianity with C, convinced him it wasn't coincidence. Still ungrateful and wishy-washy, he prayed for 2 more dreams for absolute certainty. While going to sleep months later on March 9th, Qureshi dream has him standing before a narrow brick archway, about 7.5 feet tall, under 3 feet wide, leading to a banquet room with tables of fancy food, like salad and shit, and people seated gazing left as if awaiting a speaker. David Wood sat inside, also looking left. Qureshi asked, "I thought we were going to eat together." David replied without turning, "You never responded." He saw the feast as heaven and himself excluded for not responding to God's invitation, urging him to act. Unfamiliar with the Bible, Qureshi shared it with David, who pointed to Luke 13:22-29, describing the narrow door to salvation, a heavenly banquet, and exclusion for non-responders, matching the dream verbatim. Since Qureshi hadn't read Luke, this biblical parallel validated it as divine, not imagination. He prayed for one final dream. I don't mean to be a hypothetical hero, but I would have been fully content by now instead of pushing my luck. Like, what if your persistent lack of faith despite such obvious callings left you open to demonic and deceptive visions, ruining all of his progress? I suppose God is more understanding than I, so I digress. Almost 6 weeks later, on March 23rd, Qureshi dream began with him sitting on the first step of ornate white stairs leading out of a mosque with green carpeting. He faced forward, expecting a speaker at a brown podium, while an imam, Islamic priest basically, in white was present. People were to sit on the floor, but Qureshi felt content on the stairs. Symbolizing his position on the threshold of leaving Islam, the mosque, for something new. This was the final confirmation that Qureshi didn't technically need, but graciously received, pushing him to fully embrace Christianity. It prompted him to read the Quran and Bible side by side for final clarity. Opening the Bible to Matthew 7, Sermon on the Mount, he found teachings resonating deeply, contrasting with the Quran's content, again confirming Christianity's truth. This is one man's story of how God spoke to him and guided him in a way that didn't break overly, interfere with his free will, but gave him a fair chance to be exposed to the truth. I bet Matthew 7:7 was one part that hit him, as it has for many. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. This was a man genuine in his search for God. I know plenty of agnostics and atheists who claim to have tried various avenues for finding God, leading them to doubt and trust in their own instincts. With how much I've learned since my own spiritual journey, starting from a dark place with good intentions, I can't see how anyone can conclude it's all nonsense. Misinterpretations is a leading factor in anti-Christian sentiments, but to deny the existence of the paranormal and spiritual forces at this point is pure ignorance and laziness. Nobody with Wi-Fi can honestly claim they tried to find evidence of God and didn't find it. It's everywhere, and at the core of almost every less than surface level conspiracy. As my book focuses largely on the deceptive aspect of spiritual experiences and information, I didn't want anybody to get in a black-pilled Gnostic Archon mindset and jump out of a window cause of my undeniable bangers. So, I am dedicating this section to the positive law regarding NHI interference, or at least the unmasked side which corroborates biblical viewpoints. While I believe the individual visions and revival of Christianity in spiritually dark areas of the world are becoming more prevalent now due to our undeniable entrance into tribulation, this is absolutely not exclusively a recent last-minute phenomenon. These are only a few stories of many, and shows how God uses visions to evangelize the world. Additional visions in the Muslim world. In the book Dreams and Visions, Is Jesus Awakening the Muslim World? By Tom Doyle, there is a collection of testimonies of various Muslims encountering Jesus through dreams and visions, leading many to convert to Christianity despite severe risks in their regions. Doyle, a missionary with over a decade of experience in the Middle East and Central Asia, shares real-life stories from countries like Iran, Iraq, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, where evangelism is often impossible due to cultural and legal barriers. These narratives describe vivid, recurring dreams such as Jesus appearing in white robes, extending an invitation to follow him, or healing the sick, which prompt seekers to pursue the Bible, connect with underground believers, and embrace faith in Christ. The book argues that God is supernaturally reaching unreached Muslim populations, with research cited showing that about 4 out of 7 Muslim who converted to Christianity did so due to their own personal dream or vision, meeting Jesus this way. It highlights rapid church growth, like in Iran, the world's fastest growing Christian church at the time. This phenomena obviously isn't exclusive to Muslims, but all cultures it seems that lack any direct exposure to messages from Christ. The book, Eternity in Their Hearts by Don Richardson, details similar testimonies as Doyle's is, just expanded to vaster regions. Don argues that even isolated polytheistic cultures retain innate knowledge of a supreme creator God and moral truths from Genesis, such as the fall and a coming Redeemer. Richardson presents this as evidence of God's broader covenant with humanity, refuting any non-religious people's assumptions that many cultures have no exposure or avenue to find Christ. thus shouldn't be subject to any eternal punishment, or that God is clearly not as powerful or fair as he claims. Examples of testimonies from both books are summarized below. In her vivid dream, Nor experienced an encounter with Jesus, who appeared in a radiant form that filled her with an overwhelming sense of love and peace, contrasting sharply with her everyday hardships. The vision felt intensely real and mystical, with Jesus communicating a profound personal message that addressed her inner turmoil, as well as warning of persecution. Quoting John 16:2, "The time is coming when anyone who kills you will think they are offering a service to God." This scriptural reference hit Noor deeply, leading her to reflect on how it seemed to describe the dangers faced by Muslim converts in her country and community. As the dream concluded, Jesus turned to leave and spoke directly to her, saying, "Ask my friend tomorrow about me. He will tell you all you need in order to understand why I've visited you." This directive added a guiding, prophetic element to the vision, pointing her toward Kamal, whom she recognized from the dream and encountered the next day in Cairo's market. The encounter's supernatural clarity and specificity prompted Noor to seek out more about Christianity, despite the risks in her Muslim environment. Dina, initially hostile toward Christianity and involved in Iran's secret police, experienced a powerful vision after mocking and challenging a Christian TV host, but later praying to Jesus out of desperation for her sick mother to recover. In her vision, she witnessed an instantaneous, complete healing of her mother, encased in a supernatural glow that felt divine and otherworldly, shifting her skepticism to awe as the event unfolded with undeniable clarity and immediacy, with her mother recovering exactly as envisioned, confirming Jesus' power in response to her plea. This encounter transformed Dina's role from persecutor to believer, integrating her background in law enforcement with a new calling to spread the gospel underground, emphasizing the book's portrayal of Iran's rapid church growth despite repression. The Karen people of Burma held ancient prophecies and hymns passed down through generations, foretelling the return of a lost book from their supreme god, Yuwa, who had been forgotten after their ancestors turned to lesser spirits. In these mystical traditions, Yuwa was depicted as the creator who once walked with humans, but withdrew due to humanity's sins, promising that white foreigners would one day bring back his golden book of teachings, restoring true knowledge and freeing them from demonic oppression. The prophecies were vivid and poetic, with hymns describing Yuwa's compassion and warnings against false worship, creating a divine anticipation that permeated their folklore and prepared thousands for the gospel's arrival. When American missionary Adoniram Judson and his convert Kotha Bu arrived in the early 1800s, the Karen people recognized them as the prophesied white brothers, leading to mass conversions. There was a precise fulfillment of these visions as elders recited ancient verses that mirrored biblical stories of creation, the fall, and redemption, leading to assumptions of a direct divine intervention bridging their cultural isolation with prophesied truth, reminding us that despite God's great efforts, he still utilizes men to fulfill his plans. Among the Gedio people of Ethiopia, a prophet named Warasa Wange received a vision in 1948, where the supreme god, Magano, revealed that two white men would soon arrive from afar, bringing his true message and liberating the tribe from spirit worship. This mystical encounter was a clear directive, with Warasa experiencing the presence of Magano as an all-powerful, compassionate creator, contrasting vastly with the feared local spirits that they appease as opposed to sharing a mutual love and relationship with. Warasa claimed that Magano had spoken directly to him about the coming light. This also acted as a promise to Warasa and his people of eternal salvation, which he shared with his entire community soon before fulfillment. The vision's specificity unfolded dramatically when Canadian missionaries arrived in the 1950s, matching Warasa's description, eventually leading to over 200 churches being established. There was a case of a young Palestinian man named Omar, who was raised in a refugee camp. Omar hated the Jews, somewhat of surface-level conspiracy education here. His number one goal in life was literally to murder as many Jews as possible. Not incredibly original, but I can at least respect intense passion. He decided one day to join Hamas, making arrangements to have a meeting with some of their leaders. On the way to this meeting, while walking through the streets, he begins to have a vision. He sees Jesus standing in the street blocking his path, telling him, "Omar, this is not the life I have for you. I want you to turn around and go home. This is not what I have planned for your life." Somewhat paraphrased. Shocked and confused, he's not entirely sure how legitimate this vision was, but just in case decides to obey and goes home. Later that day, a young Christian couple moves in across the hall from him. Omar decides to introduce himself and brings up his recent vision, asking what he should make of it. The couple decides to show him various passages of the Bible which inspire him and leads him to the Christian faith. Today, Omar is an underground church planter in a country closed to the gospel. Inca Emperor Pachacuti experienced a transformative vision around the 15th century, where the supreme creator Viracocha appeared to him in an ethereal form, revealing the inadequacies of sun god Inti worship and affirming Viracocha as the true universal god who sustains everything from the seen to the unseen realms. This otherworldly encounter was marked by profound wisdom, with Viracocha communicating truths about creation and divinity, leading to Pachacuti to question Inti's limitations. Inti cannot be universal if, while giving light to some, he withholds it from others. The vision led to religious reforms in the community. This prophetic revelation prepared the Inca for later gospel encounters, as Spanish missionaries found remnants of monotheism in their traditions. Dialogues in the accounts include Pachacuti's declarations to his court about Viracocha's eternal nature, which led to a reshaped Inca cosmology, despite long-standing cultural normalization of polytheism. The Santal tribe of India preserved a legendary prophecy about Thakur Jiu, the genuine god, who was the supreme creator, but whose knowledge was lost when their ancestors crossed the Himalayan mountains and began serving lesser gods to survive the journey. This vision-like narrative, surviving by oral traditions, portrayed Thakur Jiu as a transcendent being who provided for humanity but was forsaken, including ethereal descriptions of his purity and power, contrasting with the animistic spirits they later worshipped. The legend carried a longing for restoration, as if Thakur Jiu had imprinted an internal calling in their collective memory, urging them to reclaim true worship amid cultural drift. In the story's culmination, when missionaries introduced the Bible in the 1800s, Santal leaders experienced a revelatory moment, recognizing Takuraju as the Christian God through dialogues, where they examined similarities to biblical lore. This connection transformed their society, with the prophecy's fulfillment portraying a sense of divine orchestration, as their ancient songs and tales aligned seamlessly with gospel truths, highlighting a supernatural preparation hidden in their history. This is a handful of examples that show God is still very active in the world, stepping in to help where missionaries can't. Doyle frames this evidence of a spiritual awakening, giving encouragement for Western readers with calls to pray for persecuted believers, doing intercession on their behalf, which can absolutely be a catalyst for these experiences. While much of people's spiritual experiences and visions come from the demonic side attempting to deceive you, don't blackpill yourself into believing it all is. How do you tell the difference? I try to give analysis all throughout this book on the deceptive patterns, and ultimately the lesson is to judge them by their fruits. What follows these encounters? Healings can come from both sides, and we now know how this can be a tool to manipulate you further, steering you away from Jesus and the Word of God. It's hard to decipher truth when the enemy can sway you in elaborate ways, but this is what the Bible warns us of. It took me a long time to understand the importance of faith, which I thought required blind trust. But searching for answers led me here, and God has supplied enough evidence to defend his work. This is why the other side has put so much effort into inverting and twisting the core beliefs and teachings, as well as everything remotely adjacent. So if you're a casual person interested in casual relationships, with casual interest in higher things, and casual motivation to improve yourself, you will be deceived casually. But at least you won't care. Apathy can only shield you in the material realm, brother man. Hebrews 9:27. And as it is appointed for men to die once, but after this the judgment. The two exceptions of physical death in the Bible is Enoch and Elijah, who were individually raptured in the Bible. End times eschatology and prophecy tell us of the two witnesses. God will empower them to prophesy for 1,260 days, 3.5 years, clothed in sackcloth, symbolizing mourning and repentance. These witnesses will display miraculous powers such as calling down fire to destroy enemies, shut the sky to prevent rain, boosting local testosterone levels, turning water into blood, and strike the earth with plagues. Their message will warn the world of God's coming judgment and call people to repentance. After completing their testimony, the beast from the abyss, Antichrist, will kill them, probably not by his own tiny hands, and their bodies will lie unburied in the streets of Jerusalem for 3.5 days while the world celebrates their deaths. Then, in full view of their enemies, God will resurrect them, and they will ascend to heaven in a cloud. Immediately following, a great earthquake will strike Jerusalem, killing 7,000 people, and causing survivors to give glory to God. While their identities remain debated, popular theories suggest Moses and Elijah, Enoch and Elijah, or two unknown believers God raises up. Their role is clear: to serve as God's final prophetic warning during humanity's shittiest hour before Christ's return. Due to God having a 100% success rate in avoiding contradiction, It would be mega cool to bring back Enoch and Elijah for this mission. But one of my more educated Bible gangstaz homies says it's definitely John and Elijah. Whatever. Permanent eviction from DMT realm. Zoltan Bathory, the Five Finger Death Punch guitarist, once featured on Danny Jones' podcast. He described visiting the DMT realm hundreds and hundreds of times before being permanently expelled. He encountered an entity while casually passing through and told it, "I don't want to know anything. I'm just passing through," essentially treating the experience as tourism, rather than seeking knowledge or purpose. The entity was strangely pissed off for an enlightened being and instantly kicked him back to physical reality, ending the high and O.O.B.E. For 4 months, Bathory continuously attempted but could not return, no matter how much DMT he boofed. He tried repeatedly, hitting the cartridge multiple times, but would launch toward breakthrough and then hit an invisible barrier that catapulted him back to his body within a minute. Eventually, he was allowed back in, but only after intensely focusing his meditation practice on the question, "Why was I banned?" The entities informed him that he couldn't be a tourist anymore. If he returned, it must be with purpose and intent to gain knowledge, not casual exploration. Gotta maintain that self-declared wisdom brand after all. Now for the infamous Reddit testimonies, everyone's favorite. Reddit user Ghost Fade Killer posted about being banned after around 30 DMT visits. He described entities expressing irritation that he could genuinely sense, similar to a guy at a bar persistently trying to buy a drink for a woman who clearly isn't interested. The annoyance was communicated through vibes and tone, followed by stern warning that he was testing their patience. On his final visit before the ban, he was hurried down a corridor and placed in a room that resembled a padded cell, with the door shut behind me. My boy Ghost Fag Killer claims his stay in that cell felt like a decade-long isolation and time dilation abilities. After that, every attempt to break through resulted in hitting an invisible wall mid-launch that would smack him and catapult him back to his body. He consumed 23 friggin' grams of DMT in under a month trying to break back through, but no dosage worked. He was mega banned. He hasn't attempted return since, feeling he's still processing what I learned and sensing he received the insights needed. He experienced disassociation for days afterward, but ultimately felt saturated with information and has no urge to return. I sure love a happy ending. Multiple users on Reddit's r/experiences thread confirmed similar experiences, with one claiming they were told to stop visiting that realm for 3 months before being granted access to see their deceased father. After complying, they encountered a mother goddess who facilitated the reunion. Another, probably dude, used DMT as an escape during heroin addiction. The person realized the realm is meant for guidance, not casual visits. They overvisited, prompting entities to impose an interdimensional timeout, leaving them feeling insane upon realization. Additional attempts failed to grant access. The pattern is consistent. Entities go, "Hey, you're annoying me and I can't utilize your dumbass for anything." Issue warnings. Then permanently or temporarily revoke access regardless of dosage or technique. These testimonies provide compelling evidence that DMT breakthroughs are initiated primarily by demonic consent, rather than pharmacological mechanism alone. if DMT worked exclusively through neurochemical interaction, flooding serotonin receptors, altering brainwave states, disrupting default mode network, then consuming the substance should reliably produce breakthrough experiences based on dosage and brain chemistry. Yet we have multiple long-time users reporting that after being banned, they can consume massive quantities without a breakthrough, hitting invisible barriers mid-launch or being instantly returned to physical reality. The drug still enters their system. The neurochemistry still changes, but the B.O.O.B and entity contact no longer occur. This strongly suggests the chemical mostly signals willingness/consent to entities who then choose whether to grant access and generate the experience. Consider the mechanics. DMT rapidly shifts brainwaves to theta/delta states associated with deep meditation and OOBE, creating physiological conditions where consciousness becomes more susceptible to external influence. But this altered state is just the doorway. Demons decide whether you get through. When you first experiment with DMT, entities allow breakthrough because they're evaluating whether you're useful for their agenda. Casual tourists who consume DMT for recreational, trippy visuals without seeking genuine knowledge eventually get cut off because they're wasting entity time and resources. The demons aren't interested in providing entertainment to less than productive stoners. They want recruits who will integrate the cosmology they're shown and spread it to others, or, at minimum, seekers whose persistent spiritual hunger makes them ongoing targets for deeper programming. The entities expressed irritation and testing patients' language reveals their limitations. Maintaining immersive DMT experiences requires sustained effort and resource allocation. The fact that Bathory was eventually allowed back in only after demonstrating serious intent through months of focused meditation proves the gatekeeping isn't arbitrary. It's strategic move. Entities have limited bandwidth. One Reddit user explicitly theorized limited dimensional bandwidth, where tourists consume valuable bandwidth that could benefit others. So they prioritize users who will maximize return on investment, like spiritual seekers, influencers with platforms, vulnerable individuals susceptible to deeper programming, or those whose breakthrough testimonies will recruit new users. The kicked out phenomenon also explains the relatively consistent descriptions of DMT entity types across users like machine elves, jesters, insectoids, geometric beings, etc. If breakthroughs were purely neurochemical hallucinations, we'd expect a lot more variation based on individual brain chemistry, cultural background, cartoon preferences, and psychological state. Instead, we see coordinated presentation of specific entity archetypes, promoting extremely similar theological frameworks. Consciousness evolution, dimensional travel, interconnected universal mind, humans as divine sparks experiencing material limitation, and urgency to share these revelations with others. This consistency indicates centralized demonic coordination, where entities present themselves according to established protocols, tailoring specifics to individual psychology while maintaining core messaging integrity. When demons kick out a user, they are not just ending one trip. They are permanently or temporarily severing that individual's ability to achieve OBE through DMT regardless of dose. The drug still works neurochemically, Users report other psychedelic effects, but the specific doorway to entity contact closes. This proves the entities control access, not the molecule. They are essentially admitting, we gave you hundreds of opportunities to take this seriously. You treated it like a theme park ride. We're done wasting energy on your pointless consciousness excursions. Even when ruining the user's fun, they frame it as a decision based on it being unwise to continue, when in reality it could easily be purely based on the man-hours involved, which better explains their attitude. The fact that focused spiritual intent can sometimes restore access demonstrates that consent and relationship dynamics matter more than pharmacology. You're not taking a drug that forces interdimensional travel. You're taking a drug that signals demonic entities you're open to contact, and they decide whether granting that contact serves their purposes. This completely reframes DMT use. You're not exploring hyperspace or accessing higher dimensions through advanced molecules. You're requesting audience with demons who evaluate whether you're worth their time, grant or deny access based on their assessment of your usefulness, and revoke privileges when you fail to serve their agenda. The breakthrough isn't yours, it's theirs, and when they're done with you, no amount of DMT will force them to let you back in. The experience was always theirs to give, and they're making it abundantly clear they can take it away whenever your tourist ass stops being worth the interdimensional customer service. Master of the Key. In Whitley's much later 2001 book, The Key, A True Encounter, he dedicated about 100 pages of material to a 2-hour interaction that he describes as one of the most transformative experiences of his life. Occurring in 1998, between 2:30 to 4:30 a.m. in a hotel room in Toronto while on a book tour, Whitley was asleep when he was awakened by a persistent knocking on his hotel room door. Expecting hotel staff or maybe a fan, he opened the door to a strange-looking older man with pale skin and sharp features. He apparently emitted an aura of profound intelligence and calm authority, which gave Whitley a sense of immediate familiarity. The stranger did not introduce himself by name, but engaged Strieber immediately in a Socratic-style dialogue. Strieber later dubbed him the Master of the Key, due to the revelatory nature of his teachings. The exchange was intense and one-sided at first, with the visitor posing questions and offering layered explanations. Whitley took notes on a yellow pad. Topics included: Earth is a fallen world. Humans can ascend immediately as the barrier is an illusion. What feels like a hopeless, immutable reality, that we are fallen, is itself just another illusion. God is totally present in all things. Each human contains the kingdom of God. When you say God, you think of somebody outside of yourself. Now each of you can contain all of the universe. Melting polar ice will trigger an ice age via North Atlantic current shutdown. The greater part of human industry and culture will be destroyed in a single season. Christianity, active. Islam, passive. Buddhism, reconciling. Christianity seeks God. Islam surrenders to God. Buddhism finds God. Fourth mind level involves an electromagnetic organ in quantum superposition for accessing other worlds/past/future. A part of the electromagnetic field rests a few centimeters above the skin. With it, you may see other worlds. Concepts like twining, soul connections across lives. There is plenty more stereotypical New Age lore embedded, not even remotely original content. So for recap, a rebranding biblical usage of fallen, handing out the title of a god like he's Oprah, giving out cars, surface-level climate change lore. No pole shift at least? More coordinated anti-Christian rhetoric, O.O.B.E. sponsored ad, and of course, reincarnation lore. Someone please disable my pattern recognition skills. Maybe then I could relate to the common folk. Additionally, this mystery man has a new response every time Whitley asks who he is. Human, Canadian, part of all bodies, legend, and Michael. Oh, Michael, you sneaky lil thanake. I got you now, you tactless fool! Whitley sees the clock showing 2 hours had passed, but was sure it was only half an hour. But before Michael departed abruptly around 4:30 a.m., he offered Whitley a white liquid in a bathroom glass, which he drank because why not? Immediately after, Strieber remembered nothing until he woke up the next morning. Upon waking, he found the notes he had taken on a yellow pad during the encounter, which triggered his recall of the event. He then called his wife to affirm the reality of the experience, indicating that the notes were crucial in prompting his memory. This is an interesting detail, as how would someone who just experienced one of the most transformative experiences of their life, with an already batshit life story, largely forget it by morning, until reading notes describing everything discussed in detail? If the drink was some sort of forget everything that just happened juice, then why did Michael allow him to take all those notes? Or come at all? As evident by various testimonies of sleep paralysis experiencers, these dream hijackers can and will make you believe you just woke up with control over your paralyzed body, when in reality you're still dreaming, and the apparition, Hatman, Shadow People, ECT, is manifested in your dream crafted to match the room you're sleeping in, often with only small details off.
Then how do you explain the notes?
Your dumbass internal monologue may be asking. Well, a very surface-level amount of research into automatic writing will reveal that, just like audible channeling, it is always done in a trance/altered brainwave state. Sleeping absolutely falls under this category, as do dreams. Same rules of memory retainment applies as well. Many don't remember anything upon waking, some remember flashes, very few remember a lot. But memory can be stimulated to varying degrees, and his very detailed notes gave him plenty of material to jog his memory. Strieber himself leaves room for ambiguity about the visitor's origin, questioning if the man was a physical human, an astral projection, or something interdimensional manifesting in physical form, akin to a Men in Black type. He explicitly states that both the man and the encounter were real, as opposed to a self-indulged hallucination. Yet considering this was at peak witching hour, 2 to 4 a.m., and he woke up to this, remembering nothing initially, makes me reasonably confident that this was a dream manifestation, possessing him to write notes for his next book, which is then shared with his many fans. You gotta have that sweet juice. Alice Bailey, who coined the term New Age, wrote in her book Union Achieving Its Results, in Book 3, Part 2, says, "The Akashic record is like an immense photographic registering all the desires and earth experiences of our planet. The aggregation of the thought forms of karmic nature based on the desire of every human unit throughout time. Therein lays the deception of the record. Only a trained occultist can distinguish between actual experience and those astral pictures created by imagination and keen desire. Oh, sure, everybody can tap into it, but you need to be trained. You gotta be special. You gotta have that special blood, that sweet juice, or whatever they create in that moment that you need to be special. Now, if true, a large portion, if not most, of Akashic viewings, and thus remote viewing, potentially astral travel, are potentially subdued of legitimacy because of the lack of discernment of the individual, allowing subconscious manifestations to guide their experience unwittingly. If true, then vast amounts of Akashic data from various sources would contain false and imagined data, without an abundance of commonalities aside from elements of social contagion in these groups of individuals who overall share a general belief system. But there is substantial evidence of commonalities throughout reports of Akashic viewings, following the same patterns we've already covered. Assuming this is more propaganda, then this works as a semi-intelligent excuse to make the reader go through some mental gymnastics to justify any Akashic data that doesn't match their current beliefs and explain away any verifiably incorrect data that may come from it. Russian Psi Race. The following is a series of documented experiments in the realm of various psychic abilities preformed in Russia. There is a declassified CIA document from 2002, originally written in Russian. The paper details experiments conducted by the USSR involving occult practitioners. These individuals were placed in controlled environments where they were tasked with using their consciousness to carve specific symbols into a blank piece of paper sealed in an envelope. Initially, the envelope was strapped directly to the practitioner's forehead, and they successfully inscribed the symbols through focused intent. In the next phase, the envelope was placed across the room, away from the practitioner. Distance seemed to be irrelevant to the results, as the symbols were found on those as well. The key difference in the remote setup was, during the ritual, a biofield formed between the practitioner and the envelope. This manifested as a plasma-like field of light, resembling a white cloud filled with flashing corpuscular balls of light. As the practitioner performed the ritual, this cloud began to move across the room toward the envelope, witnessed by everyone present. Soviet researchers Semyon and Valentina Kirlian developed what is now known as Kirlian photography, techniques to capture auras or biofields on film, described as plasma-like discharges with flashing lights or corpuscles, particle-like balls. CIA docs from 1970s discuss this as evidence of visible energy fields around living things, photographed as colorful, glowing coronas with spark-like elements. Kirlian auras were visible only through photography, not always to the naked eye, though some reports mention a plasma-like light during rituals. More declassified CIA reports from the 1970s describe USSR experiments where psychics use consciousness to influence physical objects remotely. These included affecting sealed photographic film or paper, sometimes inscribing or exposing images/symbols through intent alone. The Soviets termed this bioplasma or bioplasma fields, a plasma-like energy field around the body that could manifest as luminescent or visible light during rituals/experiments. Then you have Nina Kulagina, a famous Soviet psychic studied in the 1960s to 1970s by scientists like Gennady Sergeyev. mentioned in CIA files. She performed PK tasks like moving objects, matches, compasses, ECT, at a distance, often inside sealed glass containers or envelopes to prevent fraud. In some tests, she affected photographic film sealed in envelopes, exposing images or patterns through mental focus alone, similar to carving symbols on paper. During sessions, observers reported visible phenomena, a bioplasma field around her body, sometimes manifesting as light flashes, sparks, or a hazy glow. Much of this was filmed. In Kulagina's experiments, the biofield wasn't always visible to everyone, often only during peak intensity. Kulagina entered a focused mental state, reportedly taking about 20 minutes to prepare. She then allegedly used her mental energy to stop the frog's heart from beating. The heart's rhythm slowed progressively until it died and was no longer alive. In some accounts, she allegedly restarted it, causing the heart to resume beating after a pause. Variations in reports exist. Not all sources confirm the restart. During this, Kulagina's own physiology reacted dramatically. Her heart rate spiked from a baseline of around 70 to 80 beats per minute to over 200 beats per minute, and there were noted changes in her brain waves and bioelectric fields, suggesting that she was freaking the fuck out. Grainy black and white footage of this exists. Kulagina performed similar experiments, like accelerating a skeptical doctor's heart rate to a dangerous level. The test was stopped for safety, or reviving near-dead fish in an aquarium. No independent labs have reliably duplicated it under strict controls. Reports note physical strain on practitioners. Kulagina suffered exhaustion, explosive diarrhea, and heart issues. Biofields could cause burns, light flashes, or interference with electronics. Not all sessions produced visible effects. It depended on her focus and environmental factors. Sergeyev's instruments detected it consistently, but naked eye visibility varied. Soviet reports were sometimes exaggerated for propaganda, and Kulagina faced a 1987 libel suit, which she partially won, after Pravda accused her of fraud. I'm not saying I believe every word of her story, but all of it is within the realm of possibility with everything else we know. It's undeniable to argue the fact that Soviets were freaky little crystal girls before it was cool. These were part of a Cold War PSI race. Soviets invested heavily in parapsychology at institutes in Leningrad and Novosibirsk to explore weaponizing consciousness like remote influence or psychic spying. Adjacent to our CIA's Stargate program, which went through many name changes to obscure activities from adversaries like the Soviets and adapt to shifts in oversight, funding, or administrative structure. Frequent changes help prevent leaks, compartmentalize information, and align with evolving bureaucratic needs without drawing attention. Starting off as Skenate, to Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, Center Lane, and Sunstreak before landing on Stargate. They publicly ended the program in 1995. If you believe that I don't think we can be friends anymore, it's you, not me. Semi-relevant side quest time. Even though Project Stargate's legacy seems to have ended, it actually lives on through its modern rebranding. Nobody seems to remember what Little Horn did on his first full day back in office on January 21st, 2025. He brought in OpenAI CEO Sam Altman and Oracle Chairman Larry Ellison for a joint project which aims to invest up to $500 billion in AI infrastructure across the United States by 2029. The announcement was framed as a strategic move to keep America ahead in the global AI race, particularly against competitors like China, by building massive data centers, securing chips, and expanding energy and water resources for AI development. Donnie T proudly bragged about creating the largest AI infrastructure project in history. But why call it Project Stargate? Is it because the AI surveillance beast system grid it creates will essentially have the power to see anything at will? A technological replicant of a powerful psychic remote viewer. The name Stargate nods to the 1994 sci-fi film about intergalactic portals symbolizing a gateway to future tech. You're right. I'm sure it's nothing. Ted, the PK man, Owens. Then you have even more outrageous characters like Ted Owens, 1920 to 1987, the central figure profiled in Jeffrey Mishlov's book, The PK Man, a true story of mind over matter. Owens, a self-proclaimed psychic from the United States, dubbed himself the PK Man, short for psychokinesis, having the alleged ability to influence physical objects or events with the mind. Mishlove, a parapsychologist and host of the TV series Thinking Aloud, documented Owen's life, claims, and demonstrations over several years, containing personal interviews, correspondence, and public records. Owens asserted he could summon earthquakes, hurricanes, blackouts, and UFOs on demand, frequently as proof when challenged by skeptics. Examples in the book include: Owens claimed he ended a severe California drought in 1976 by inducing heavy rainfall. He sent notarized letters to officials beforehand, predicting rain within days. Mishlove notes that rain did follow, but skeptics attribute it to natural weather patterns, El Niño cycles. No definitive causation was established. Owens claimed he caused the July 13th to 14th, 1977 blackout affecting 9 million people to protest government dismissal of his abilities. He sent prior letters to officials. Mishlove notes the timing, but attributes the blackout to a documented lightning strike on power lines, not psychokinesis. Ironically, Owens also claims power over lighting, so checkmate Jeffrey. Influencing Hurricane David in 1979 to veer off course after his request to the SI's space intelligences. Triggering UFO waves such as the 1973 U.S. sightings. Mishlove tested some claims scientifically, like correlating Owens' predictions with weather data, but results were inconclusive. Impressive coincidences to believers, selective cherry-picking to critics. Owens asserted he could heal illnesses or influence people's thoughts via psychokinesis, guided by the SIs. He claimed to help followers with ailments or sway decisions. One of Owens's most audacious assertions was that he caused the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, January 28, 1986, to punish NASA for ignoring his warnings about UFOs and his powers. He claimed the S amplified his psychokinetic influence to sabotage the shuttle. I don't believe he did this because all of the passengers who died were found a few years ago, half of which posing as their dead brother/sister's identical twin, most teaching at nice colleges with a slight name change. Classic NASA. Hilarious coincidence, though. The book blends biography, investigation, and philosophy. Mishlove neither fully endorses nor debunks Owens, instead exploring implications for consciousness, science, and ethics. He portrays Owens as charismatic, yet troubled, unlike our niche cultural stereotypes for powerful psychics. Owens is described as brilliant in intuition, but prone to ego, paranoia, and resentment toward doubters. Mishlove estimates Owens' hits at 60 to 80% for some claims, but stresses this isn't proof of causation. Owens claimed that in 1965, he experienced a sudden and transformative encounter with entities he called space intelligences. He described this as a pivotal moment where he was chosen by these beings to act as their human intermediary, which he described as higher dimensional insectoid, mantis, entities with godlike powers. He claimed they chose him as a human agent to demonstrate psychokinetic PK abilities, like controlling weather or summoning UFOs to awaken humanity to their existence and influence, as well as to warn humanity about nuclear and environmental threats. This belief was central to his identity and framed his PK feats as collaborative efforts with the SEs. He frequently spoke of manipulating energy through mental focus, a concept loosely akin to New Age ideas of universal energy or consciousness. However, he didn't explicitly tie this to established systems like theosophy or spiritualism, instead framing it as a scientific or quasi-scientific phenomenon guided by the SIs. Mishlove notes Owens was more practical than philosophical, focusing on demonstrating PK rather than preaching a belief system. Owens saw himself as a prophet-like figure with a mission to prove the reality of PK and extraterrestrial intelligence. He believed his powers were a gift from the SIs to bridge science and the supernatural, often overconfidently comparing himself to certified badasses like Moses or Tesla, but without explicit religious connotations. Owens stated the SIs communicated that they were advanced non-human intelligences from another dimension or planet, tasked with guiding humanity's evolution. They saw him as a suitable candidate due to his openness to unconventional ideas and his strong personality. Absolutely certifiable. Nobody can argue with that. Owens even authored a book in 1969 appropriately titled How to Contact Space People, magnificent and to the point. In it, Owens explicitly detailed a mental vision from the SIs in 1965, where they revealed a system for communication via a small chamber containing two small creatures resembling grasshoppers, insect-like, standing on two legs. These appeared as the direct interface for his telepathic link, which he used to request phenomena like weather events or UFO sightings. He nicknamed these entities Twitter and Tweeter, portraying them as affectionate alien helpers who facilitated his PK abilities. These two apparently implanted his abilities via psychic surgery on his brain, evidenced by a scar he showed others. Owens emphasized that these insectoid figures were not the pinnacle of the SEs. The boss, or higher intelligence, is manifested as pure light, having no form at all. In visions, it appeared as a shadowy face with two shining green eyes on a screen-like interface adapted to human familiarity, but fundamentally ethereal. He consistently framed the SIs as hyperdimensional or other time-space beings, not strictly physical extraterrestrials operating from a realm beyond matter. This light essence tied into his claims of channeling their energy where the power flowed through him as a conduit. He never once claimed to be independent psychic, always ultimately crediting his space homies. As for the instruction manual element of his book, turns out contacting interdimensional grasshopper gods is pretty easy. To begin, you must fully believe in the SY's existence and their willingness to communicate. Doubt blocks the connection. Owens stressed an open, childlike mindset, free of skepticism. Give me a complete memory wipe and sign my ass up. Then, of course, it's meditation time. Clear your mind, then picture a small mental chamber or interface where the S-is reside. Owens described this as a vivid image of a control room with two insectoid beings or a screen showing a light-based entity with green eyes. Focus intensely on this image, treating it as a psychic telephone to the S-eyes. Don't forget to use affirmations like,
I am ready to connect with the space intelligences for the good of humanity.
Consent is key. Mentally project a clear, specific request to the SIs, such as asking for a UFO sighting, personal guidance, or a minor PK demonstration. Owens emphasized clarity and intent, which is important to bypass those pesky metaphysical guardrails. Be patient for signs, which could be subtle, a feeling of presence, vivid dreams, or dramatic. Owens claimed responses often came within hours or days. Keep a journal to note any phenomena, as the S's might test your awareness with small signs before escalating. They won't waste their time unless you're a dedicated disciple. And maybe most of all, only those with a shiny golden heart and pure intentions have a shot at being contacted. Selfish desires for power will get you nowhere with these upstanding non-citizens. He died penniless and alone in 1987, reportedly from a heart attack. He was also fat and had male pattern baldness. Head magic. In ancient times, back in biblical-era cultures like those in the Near East, people who worshipped idols, basically occult practitioners or magicians, would perform rituals to connect with dark spirits or entities. One common practice started with the practitioner sitting by a fading fire at night, calling out into the darkness to summon an entity and ask it to do some kind of powerful magic, something the practitioner called head magic, a term for rituals involving the mind or consciousness. The entity would respond and guide the person to a hidden spot where it would make a piece of metal appear out of nowhere, materializing it into our world. The entity then instructed the practitioner to carve the name of an unclean spirit, a demon or evil being, into that metal. By doing this, the entity promised to fuse its own memories and essence into the metal, turning it into a kind of magical implant. But that wasn't enough. The metal needed a living or once living host to fully activate. So the practitioner had to find a dead body, a cadaver, and place the engraved metal under its tongue. Somehow this would wake up the entity's consciousness inside the corpse, turning the dead body into a vessel or avatar that the entity could control and speak through. Now, the practitioner could talk directly to the reanimated body as if it were the entity itself, hosting its presence. This same idea showed up in ancient Egyptian practices too, where similar implants under the tongue were used in rituals to communicate with spirits or the dead. Gillies explains this as the root of implantation in occult lore, where entities use humans or bodies to replicate and manifest themselves. He contrasts it with modern stories like UFO abductions, where people get mysterious implants, saying it's the same deceptive force recontextualizing old rituals for today. Intersection of technology and metaphysical. Research in neuroscience has made strides in understanding how memories are formed, stored, and recalled, such as in the hippocampus, amygdala, and prefrontal cortex. Some studies have explored ways to influence or create memory-like effects, though not at the level of fully synthetic, complex, narrative-driven memories. 2013, MIT researchers led by Susumu Tonegawa used optogenetics, light-based neural control, to implant false memories in mice. They identified neurons in the hippocampus associated with a specific memory, a safe environment, and then artificially activated those neurons while giving them a mild shock in a different context. The mice later showed fear responses in the original safe environment, suggesting they had a false memory of being shocked there. Kind of fucked up, not peak evil, of course. This demonstrated that specific neurons could be manipulated to create a false association, fear tied to a place. However, these are simple associative memories, not complex narratives. By 2023, studies continued refining optogenetics in mice, showing more precise control over memory engrams. AI systems like those developed by DeepMind or OpenAI can simulate realistic sensory inputs, video and audio, that could be paired with neural interfaces. A 2023 study in Nature Neuroscience showed AI could reconstruct visual imagery from brain scans with 80% accuracy, hinting at potential to encode visual experiences. Then you have the Stanford University researchers, led by Assistant Professor Frank Willett, have developed a brain-computer interface, BCI, that can decode inner speech/thoughts with up to 74% accuracy in real time, as reported in a study published on August 14, 2025, in the journal Cell. The study involved 4 participants with severe paralysis from amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, or a brainstem stroke. Microelectrode arrays were implanted in the motor cortex, the brain region responsible for speech, to record neural activity patterns associated with imagined speech. These patterns were translated into words and sentences using machine learning algorithms, achieving a proof of concept demonstration with a vocabulary of up to 125,000 words. These people behind these experiments claimed interested in restoring communication for people unable to speak due to paralysis, offering a less physically taxing alternative to BC, is that rely on attempted speech. Keep in mind this is just covering publicly known studies and research, and if the technology is possible, which it seems to be, there may easily be much more advanced work accomplished in our Black projects. There is also a well-documented 2019 experiment known as BrainNet, where researchers successfully created a non-invasive brain-to-brain interface connecting 3 people. This allowed them to collaboratively share thoughts without speaking. They tested them just by having them play a Tetris-like game, not mentioning any integration of emotions or memories, but sending information using non-invasive headcaps. The senders of information had their thoughts recorded via electroencephalography, generating distinct electrical patterns in their visual cortex. The receiver wore a cap that delivered magnetic pulses to their brain's occipital lobe, which processes visuals. If we are to believe any of the testimonies of space brother abductions, then we have to believe that technology can interface on the alchemical and etheric levels. Regarding phasing in/out, soul transferring via tech/ECT, whether or not humans have access to these, or earlier forms of this tech is hard to say, the advanced psychic abilities of these beings have the capability of things our technology can accomplish, and vice versa. I don't believe these two worlds can't intersect, as collective testimonies support. If this is true, there is a huge range of implications of further memory hijacking to be performed by physical means as well as supernatural. If Mark of the Beast technology is just around the corner, totally is, this could be a potential addition to its usage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This just for entertainment purposes, of course. I might as well mention that when this mark is available, I believe that it will be equivalent to signing a consent form to any nearby demons who desire to partially, if not fully, possess you. So, even if there is no technological aspect to memory implantation or alteration involved, the demons you allow to influence you will take care of that if they desire. But if possession is total with some of these people, I suppose it won't be necessary to deceive you any further, as you are beyond being a concern for them. And since I don't believe I have any chance of getting this thing published, I can get as theoretical as I want. Generational Sin and DNA. The 2014 article, Transgenerational Epigenetic Inheritance, by Eric J. Carlson, published in Perspectives on Science and Christian Faith. It reviews multiple studies showing how parental lifestyle decisions such as diet, drug exposure, or social/abusive experiences can cause heritable epigenetic changes, DNA methylation, that alter gene expression in offspring and beyond, potentially providing a biological parallel to inherited sin or its consequences. In the Dutch hunger winter, 1945, prenatal famine exposure led to persistent DNA methylation changes in the IGF-2 gene involved in growth, observable decades later in survivors, and linked to higher birth weights in their offspring. This is evidence of how severe nutritional stress can imprint transgenerational epigenetic markers. Vinclozolin, a fungicide, giving a high-dose exposure in pregnant rats caused reduced sperm count and fertility in male offspring, with altered DNA methylation in 52 genes persisting for 4 generations, showing how environmental toxins, analogous to bad decisions like substance abuse, can transmit reproductive issues epigenetically. Brain tissue from suicide victims with abuse histories showed similar methylation increases in stress-related genes, mirroring rodent findings and suggesting trauma's epigenetic legacy. Pups receiving low-quality care showed increased methylation of the glucocorticoid receptor gene, leading to heightened stress responses and depressive behaviors. These changes passed to the next generation, even if offspring were cross-fostered to nurturing mothers. You get the point. I don't need to know what all those words mean exactly, and neither do you. This puts verses like Exodus 25 in a more layered context. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me. The verse is not saying children are directly punished for their parents' sins, but that the consequences of sin can persist across generations if the pattern continues. Conversely, the next verse, Exodus 26, highlights God's mercy extending to thousands of generations for those who love and obey him, showing his grace far outweighs his judgment. Fuck yeah. Hologram tech. For almost 2 decades, the Department of Defense and NASA have coordinated on a Black Book project on the codename Firesign. Fire Sign's aim is to create a religious awe effect in enemy populations to create an instantaneous, psychological, soft kill, abject submission. The operation uses high-powered lasers to project real-seeming images on the sodium layer 100 kilometers above the surface. These images can cover hundreds or even thousands of square miles and can appear completely real, three-dimensional, and can move. These visual cues are augmented with pulsed ELF, electromagnetic emissions, project sanguine, that attack the specific areas of the prefrontal cortex that are stimulated during religious experience, similar to the God helmet experiments, but not requiring a helmet and affecting just one individual. In limited tests, subjects have been able to be overwhelmed on both axes of vastness, an overwhelming of the subject's frame of reference, and a powerful need for accommodation. The mix of these two will produce inaction, lack of focus on self or individual interaction, and gross transformations in mental equilibrium. Mead Labs Revisited. Those who experience or relive My Lab's memories claim the space homies are working with our fellow humans. But how do we know these humans aren't late-stage hybrids which can pass physically as human? Or if they are human, what are the odds they're not in their alter, aka a possessed personality, being themselves victims of MK Ultra programs? Severance is low-key, a documentary, by the way. Who else would black projects trust with such high-level secrecy? With how freaked up and convoluted all of the evidence of deception is, how do we know these aren't all screen memories to increasingly muddy the waters? I can't say for sure, but anyone who does is jumping into dangerously retarded territory. Though I can see how hypocritical that sounds. What I will say for sure is that if these are real programs with regular-ass non-wholesome humans, they are not in charge. It might benefit some humans' goals, but it's ultimately all controlled by malevolent NHI, whatever you want to call them. This may just be another branch offloading some of the hard labor from their interdimensional sister employees. A leading indicator to me is that My Lab's victims will often be abducted shortly following space homie abduction and questioned on what they experienced, saw, heard, ECT. If they work for/with NHI, then they're not asking because they want to know what's going on, while following up with adjacent work to the NHI causes. It's to leave you with that memory which gives you little room for interpretation outside of the idea that these are two different factions who are not working together. Both are intensely evil, but in unidentifiably different ways, doubling that by making you a potential disinformation spreading useful idiot. What a ridiculous lack of chill these experiencers have. On top of that, they gotta small talk with normies, work 40 hours a week, and find someone who wants to bang them forever. A total handful. I pray for these sweet fools. A deeper look into the My Labs operations can be found in My Labs. Military, Mind Controlled, and Alien Abduction by Helmut and Marion Lammer, which compiles dozens of experiencer testimonies from the 90s onward, framing these as joint human ET ops, rather than solo alien gigs. Some interrogators ask questions like,
"What did they show you? Did they mention timelines or bases, any implants?"
Like those in the Lammer book or from experiences like Leah Haley, add that aliens might join in telepathically, probing memories while the humans take notes, blurring the lines on who's driving. This ties into broader claims of screen memories being implanted during these sessions to fuzz up the sequence, making the whole thing feel disjointed when you recall it later. Additionally, I see the timelines question as a huge red flag. As a biased Christian who doesn't believe in alternate timelines or even time travel for more reasons than faith, if my theater theories have any legs, not crippled and in a roller chair, then this is another subtle method of planting disinformation, validating the cosmological theory of alternate timelines. Because why else would they ask about it? Why would an opposing, also evil alien faction be telling their zombified cum machine anything insightful about alternate timelines or base locations that could possibly benefit this opposing faction? It's stupid and so intense of an experience. These poor conduits of disinformation can't fathom the concept of elaborate theater for this exact purpose. But I calls 'em like I sees 'em. Manufacture-controlled opposition to drown out unified patterns. Smart, but lazy. I got a few more data points regarding my lab interrogations, diving into Helmet and Lammer's book more. Some additional questions they ask are:
what did the aliens tell you about their plans for Earth? Or did they give you any messages for the government or world leaders?
Ha ha. Okay, sure, bro. If I want to figure out aliens, wink, plan for Earth, all I gotta do is pick up the most widely available book of all time, or maybe ask your boss.
Describe any devices or symbols they showed you. Do you know what they do? Or are you aware of any foreign objects in your body from them?
Whoa, be careful, dog. Symbols. Little too close to sigils. Something completely unrelated to extraterrestrial life, silly man. Also, you guys work with other factions of aliens and have portal and mind wipe tech, but don't know how to use an X-ray. Holes! So many holes! I feel like I'm friggin' Shia LaBeouf in 2003. Ironically, he's also an MKU baby, according to his twin sis Anya Wick's testimony. Gosh, I cannot stay on topic. Get me some Ritalin ASAP.
Did they mention other groups or beings, reptilians, Nordics, anything like that? Or what year or place did they say they came from?
Ha 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 ha. These bastards are no match for me and my Nancy fucking Drew cosplay. Just like all other channeled lore, they're clearly trying to world build this vast universe of various factions and races, when we've got too many accounts of seeing them all grouped together in various forms. Then attempting to solidify the time travel psyop, one of their more successful fabrications. Greer. Now, if that whole rant is pointless and the opposing views are accurate, and all of this alleged advanced memory-altering tech is just a psyop to cover up these things happening in the spirit, sourced from demonic hijackers, and whoever alleges this, I would like to formally dap them up and say, I like your style, brother man, but hold up! If I've learned anything since my journey of becoming a locally mocked disciple of the Lord, it's that anything we label as spiritual or scientific are not separate concepts, but deeply intertwined concepts. We can affect technology via spiritual means and emulate spiritual gifts from technological means. Aside from memory-altering tech, stargates as potential wormholes or teleportation tech, cell phones as artificial telepathy, binaural beats engineering altered states like OOBE, the God helmet using magnetic fields to induce visions or perceiving entities, brain-computer interfaces, BCI, deep brain stimulation, DBS, and ultrasound for visionary states, quantum random number generators, QRNGS, for psychokinesis testing, biofeedback, and haptic tech for energy work. Scientists believing they can achieve true consciousness uploads, not to mention the alleged soul-transferring tech the space homies, also Meat Labs, operate. But let's save that for Volume 2. At their core, spirituality and science aren't rivals. Each one is informing the other in a feedback loop. Just look at quantum mechanics, the observer effect, where measurement collapses, probability waves into particles, implies consciousness isn't a byproduct of matter, but a fundamental force shaping it. Tech like the God Helmet or QRNGs doesn't fake spirituality. It reveals that spiritual phenomena might be emergent properties of brain electromagnetic interactions, quantifiable and hackable. Think of technology as an exoskeleton for the soul. Humans have always extended our innate abilities through tools. It's no coincidence, evolutionarily. Tech evolves from our psychic potentials, also friendly channeled dudes, amplifying what was once subtle into overt powers. On a metaphysical level, this symbiosis points to a universe where consciousness permeates everything from subatomic particles to your mom's boyfriend to silicon chips. But over-reliance on tech can dilute the organic mystery of spirituality, turning enlightenment into an app subscription. Yet, it could also democratize it, allowing mass awakenings that shift collective reality. But wait, it won't. I just remembered what human nature is. I stand by my thoughts. Science demystifies the spiritual, while spirituality inspires scientific leaps. Miracles are just engineering we haven't mastered yet. 5th grade math level Stan. Stan Romanek, a Colorado resident, claimed multiple abductions starting in 2000, documented in his book, Messages, the world's most documented extraterrestrial contact story, and the documentary Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story. Geez, I wonder what he'll name his BBQ sauce. His experiences included the classic UFO sightings, physical injuries, implants, and hypnotic regressions revealing ET interactions. Romanek reported being given advanced knowledge during these events, supported by videos, photos, and equations. In the visionary experiences, Romanek witnessed extraterrestrials imparting high-order math equations related to space travel and planetary diagrams, often drawn in his sleep or in a trance with eyes closed post-abduction. He described these as puzzles from ETs, providing parts without the whole so close, pointing to interstellar travel manipulation, but lacking cohesive models. Maybe because they don't exist. One equation was drawn in summer 2005, with no memory of writing it. He attributed it to ETs entering his mind. He emphasized these could not be hoaxed, as scientists confirmed their validity for space-time concepts, not conceivable by such an average Stan. Possibly even a below-average Stan, as he had no problem admitting his lifelong traumatic battle with dyslexia and 5th grade math ability, like many who grow up with a cell phone, telephone, or drinking tap water. During hypnotic regression sessions starting in summer 2002, he carried out a series of tests where he was given just pen and paper in a trance and wrote out more complex equations and diagrams. This went on for years with Lindemann and Dr. R. Leo Sprinkle. He also produced them in sleep with witnesses. Equations included electron configuration for element 115, Drake equation, estimates intelligent ET civilizations, varying from 1 to 10,000 plus. Other outputs were star charts, diagrams, etc. He proposed to guide new interstellar tech like warping space-time / wormholes, overcoming relativity, regular chill dude stuff. Dr. Jack Kasha, UN Omaha physics professor, MUFON, noted his complexity and validity, but these breadcrumbs for propulsion/wormholes gave little new insight into psychics. So this possessing entity who, automatic, wrote on behalf of Dumb Stan, the perfect conduit, continuously blue-balled these scientists with either existing and understood equations as well as incomplete, thus largely useless equations that gave spectators a view of a potential advanced technology with massive implications, but always at arm's length. Just enough data to wow the audience, never enough to amount to any tangible breakthroughs. At least not with the common folk. If Stan and friends were, say, a consenting pagan worshipper who established a soul contract of sorts with said pagan gods, and additionally had connections to powerful individuals, then, yeah, maybe they would get the whole blueprint. These beings only share truly implicative tech and knowledge if the benefits are reaped on behalf of their greater agenda. In every case, a lot of this acceleration of technological advancements are cool and shiny at first, and obviously much can be used for good and evil, like any tool. But don't forget that large sums not only are sourced from Nitwit contacts, but can be controlled by them from the other side. No, Satan totally wouldn't be able to possess the incoming AI singularity when it achieves a false technological omnipresence on Earth. Soon, haha. That's as crazy. Dog, you need to take a chill pill. Bro, haha, for real though. Take these pills. I need you to take them. Now, I'm so serious. You need to take these pills because this shit is freaky, and you're seriously scaring the hoes. Look at Tammy Lynn, she's shaking. But not in a fun way. Look, her rhythm is all off, dude. You fudged her tempo with your nuanced concepts. No more of this nerd's nonconformist head ass. Dude's sentences aren't even rhyming. How am I supposed to lock in without a sick beat? Nah, girl, we're keeping it surface level. Tammy Lynn, targeted ads and DoorDash. That's the dream, right? Right, Tammy Lynn. Teleporting pilot channels, boring alien. In June 1976, a 23-year-old Mexican pilot trainee named Rafael Perez went on his first solo flight from Chimalhuacán, Mexico, in a small Cessna plane, intending to complete a simple loop and return to the airport. The flight was meant to be a straightforward demonstration of his ability to fly without panicking, using instruments like compasses and altimeters, as GPS systems were not yet invented. This day happened to be covered by a dense fog, which obscured his view and navigation, leading to him panicking as he lost contact with the control tower. Despite his attempts to steer the plane, it began climbing autonomously to 10,000 feet into a thick cloud, where Perez felt an overwhelming tiredness, and shortly after, passed out. When he regained consciousness, he found himself over open ocean, with the plane back at 7,000 feet and the fog cleared, despite not having nearly enough time or fuel to reach such a location. The gas gauge showed 3/4 full, contradicting any logic Perez was trying to grasp. A man reaches out to him over the radio. The recorded transmissions during this period were garbled and static-filled, with Perez confused and in a panic mode over his inability to control the plane, which was ascending and flying straight despite his attempts to steer it. He reported that the plane was climbing on its own, and that he was unable to regain control. Carlos then asks, "Are you alone in your airplane?" Perez states he is, and Carlos advises him on where to land nearby of the coast of Acapulco, Mexico. He then manages to get there without any more interference. Immediately after landing, he is taken by intelligence agents from an unspecified agency into custody for interrogation. They were particularly interested in the details of his experience, especially the communication with Carlos and the autonomous behavior of the plane. Perez was under extensive questioning about the voice on the radio, the sudden change in his location, and the unexplained fuel levels. The agents were concerned about the potential implications of non-human intelligence interacting with human technology, and they sought to understand whether Perez had been influenced or possessed by an external entity. During his detention, Perez recounted his experience multiple times, but his memory of the events was fragmented, without remembering any of the period when he was unconscious. The intelligence agents analyzed the radio recordings and cross-referenced them with other unexplained aerial phenomena reported around the same time. They also conducted medical and psychological evaluations to rule out hallucinations or other explanations for his experience. This entire time, Perez has no idea why they are doing all of this and what happened when he was out. They finally decide to share his own transcripts with him. Turns out Carlos was in touch with Perez just after he went unconscious. As soon as the plane showed up on his radar, Carlos asks who he is because he's over their airspace unexpectedly. And in a very deep, almost robotic voice, Perez says, "The pilot is speaking, but not of his own free will. We are using him as a microphone. Your equipment is too primitive. It is not important who we are or where we come from, only that we are inhabitants of the same universe." And for the next 35 or so minutes, the being possessing Perez spoke about how humanity is the only intelligent species in the universe that uses warfare and conducts violence on each other, and that we are poised for a nuclear holocaust, and we may be exterminated if this continues. Act. After this, Perez wakes up, and his voice changes completely, and starts freaking out, saying he fell asleep at the wheel and needs help. This is when Carlos asks to confirm if anybody else is in the craft with him. Nobody could ever explain how his plane ended up so far off the coast. His plane was completely undamaged. There's a few implications here I want to mediocrely address. 1. This shows even more evidence of NHI's ability to not only possess humans while in certain trance states, which they also seemingly can help induce, but clearly has some, if not much, degree of control over our technology, possibly adding some legitimacy to the whole microchips designed like sigils theories, which are fun and not that crazy, regardless of how it's possible technologically or spiritually. There's too many testimonies, at least anecdotally, proving these entities can and will manipulate electrical devices. In all the haunting and poltergeist stories out there, and their apparent manipulation of our technology, if these really are all one team of entities masking themselves, then we have to take this idea seriously. The implications of that, alongside the AI singularity, is immense, especially regarding the Bible's descriptions of the end times, Antichrist, and false prophet giving breath, life, to the image of the beast. Second, this story is another example of channeled information being consistently deceptive. The voice possesses this man to share some very basic and surface-level accusations of the human race and their mistakes. Nothing new here. One quote that stands out, though, is the claim that humans are the only intelligent life taking part in warfare or hurting each other, as it possess a young man, putting his life in danger. Now, most channeled beings will eventually touch on our need to denuclearize in order to join the Galactic Federation Club. Again, it's really a game of virtue signaling to convince us they morally earned their place on their high horse. Yet, in the more skillfully crafted channelings, they are very clear of all the vast life in the universe. There are many positive and negative-oriented species, or STS versus STO. But this was the 70s before a lot of the more popular channeled material today clarified this. I want to try to put my demonic trickster helmet back on for a sec and understand the goal here. To me, it seems they chose this method of communication because if it weren't for these 3-letter agencies, this would have been a huge story, and Piriz could have been viewed as a sort of unwilling prophet for these space brothers, at least within the circles giving it their attention. The potential, at least circumstantial evidence of teleportation or some other fantastic scenario would definitely help shine a bigger spotlight on this story. Some may take away from it the importance of denuclearization to finally get world peace, which is a lost cause, and the Watchers know wouldn't get any realistic traction due to their influence on the people who actually control the nukes. But the goal, once again, seems to be to spread New Age doctrine like wildfire. These methods of dispersing knowledge are so manipulative. The idea of taking them at face value is insane. But without a general knowledge of the history of these interdimensional theater boys, it will likely fly over your stupid head. Third is the explanation of this plane's distance traveled due to some sort of teleportation, akin to the MH370 situation, possibly. If that was real, I lean towards the scenario being carried out by humans, but whatever we have, they do them better. If it wasn't for the mostly full gas tank aspect, I could be open to a local time-dilated bubble situation or some shit. But that doesn't seem to fit here. Did Perez pass through an area where the thinning of the veil between realms was so strong that it allowed him to be taken over? Did he carry this attachment with him beforehand, and it utilizes an opportunity to create a show? If you take one thing away from this book, I'd hope it's that, wow, this guy really asks more questions than he attempts to answer. No, they aren't possessed. They are just hybrid infiltrators. When I read channeled material from these entities, guess what never comes up? Elaborate psychic-related deception. But you have books like Allies of Humanity warning us of invading aliens, channeled from the good alien, for our physical resources, nothing relevant to our soul or anything deeper. Interestingly, to save face and maintain credibility, they do seem to expose the hybrid breeding program in a way that's very close to reality. It's detailed primarily in books 1 and 3 as a key tactic of the intervention. The program involves abducting people, often repeatedly and without full awareness, to interbreed humans with alien races, creating hybrids that appear human but are genetically and mentally aligned with the space dicks. The purpose is said to be to overcome the invaders' biological incompatibility with Earth's environment. They can't live on the surface due to microbial hazards and risk contaminating their own worlds. To produce a new leadership and representatives loyal to the intervention who can infiltrate human society, assume positions of power, and promote their agenda, all to secure human assistance in resource extraction and to establish long-term control without overt conquest. Hybrids are described as having enhanced sensitivities and abilities, but lacking core human qualities, and they serve as apologists or advisors in government, commerce, and religion to minimize resistance and make legislative changes. If the intervention succeeds, these hybrids would help integrate humanity into the collective's networks. If stopped, reintegrating hybrids into society would require shielding them from ongoing mental influences and rebuilding their allegiance to humanity. The program is portrayed as weird and unethical, as well as against our free will, differing from ancient interbreeding law that allegedly enhanced human intelligence. Nukes are dangerous. Please be careful. As of today, there have been over 2,100 nuclear weapon detonations for weapons testing, half of which by America. Throughout various channel texts, our space brothers make claims of nukes having an existential radiation threat, or even damaging other dimensions sharing the same space. If this is accurate, why haven't they intervened already? Aren't we causing aggressive damage to our neighboring dimensions? Like most surface-level information we get directly from these beings, their interest seems purely theatrical so they can seed the false alien savior narrative. That there are space homies who care about us and the planet, who will intervene if and when thermonuclear exchange kicks off. So they hang around nuclear sites every once and while, toy with missile functions, simultaneously pumping out humans must get rid of nukes, messages through their abductees and channelers. The other reason could be that nuclear technology isn't what we think it is. If it requires knowledge of etherics and the Earth grid, documented by Bruce Cathy, then that opens up other demonic capabilities, meaning you can only develop nukes if you work for them, and if you don't, they will be able to find out and have many ways of stopping you. I personally believe all these world superpowers and leaders answer to their high-level elites, making up their different factions of secret societies, whether it be Jesuits, Freemasons, Dragon Society, Jews entirely, etc. People like to point to one of these groups declaring, no, it's really them. All of these top members are taking orders from their fallen angel contacts, if not partially or fully possessed, and whether they know it or not, they are all on the same team working towards the satanic agenda. So, if WW3, or at least some major warring escalations, took place, would be orchestrated on purpose to make ETs look good and gain collective consent for a planetary regime change. They'd do some theatrical performances for the lower ranks, missile silo crew, ship crews, etc., to build credibility and viral testimony for their narrative, together with managed abduction and contact scenarios that reinforce their narrative. Could what we've seen playing out in recent years with the managed disclosure push be pre-programming for a specific story to play out when the time comes? And how come ETs themselves don't give away US military secrets to abductees/contactees? Like, we must warn you of a new weapon being developed at military base called the whatever project, which is capable of, oh no, that's not good. Please tell the world. You could argue that they're okay with these tests since they don't destroy human life at a mass scale, but it still disproves the nukes would harm other dimensions narrative. Occultist admits aliens are a psyop. Kenneth Grant, the heir of Aleister Crowley's Thelema cult, which he personally mentored, has an insightful and blatant admittance quoted in one of his books, Outside the Circles of Time.
The euphonauts are not flesh and blood beings from other planets, but etheric entities from the Mauve Zone, the interzone between the astral and physical planes. They are the same entities that the ancients knew as angels, demons, and elementals, but in the new aeon, they manifest as extraterrestrials, because the time has come for humanity to recognize them in a form compatible with scientific materialism. Today they are called euphonauts, or extraterrestrials. Tomorrow they may be acknowledged as the praetor-human intelligences they truly are. These beings demand worship, not in the old religious sense of propitiation, but through the mantric vibrations of the new aeon, the euphologics, which are the keys to their gates. The euphonauts respond to the power waves impinging upon Earth from outside, and the magician who would contact them must attune his consciousness to these vibrations by means of sigils and seals derived from the Thelemic pantheon. We have their sigils already in the glyphs of the Old Ones, as revealed in the Enochian ethers and the Bornless ritual, and in the portraits of Lam and Aiwas. Crowley opened the way with his evocation of Choronzon and his reception of the Book of the Law from Aiwas. The contactees of the 1950s, Adamski, Hill, Menger, and others, were unwitting magicians who stumbled upon these forces without the proper keys. Their messages, garbled through the filters of their mundane minds, echo the Thelemic gnosis. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. But without the sigils and the discipline of the OTO, their encounters led to confusion and fear. The euphonauts seek worshippers who can handle the fire of their current, not the timid who flee from shadows. In the aeon of Ma'at, the double current will flood the world, and those who possess the sigils, the Typhonian magicians, will guide the transformation. The day approaches when the veils of illusion will be rent, and the extraterrestrials will be seen for what they are. The Old Ones returning, not as gods to be feared, but as allies in the great work. Lam, the gateway, is the sigil par excellence. Gaze upon his portrait, and the tunnel opens. Through it, the power descends, demanding surrender.
Even high-level occultists know and admit they are not extraterrestrial. Self-explanatory. Choronzon Revisited. Speaking of Crowley, going back to his work in Vision and the Voice, it's worth revisiting the entity Choronzon because he seems like a fun time. In late 1909, the infamous Aleister Crowley traveled to the Sahara Desert in Algeria with his student and assistant, Victor Newberg. They were there to perform a series of advanced magical rituals based on Enochian magic, a system of angel summoning developed by John Dee in the 16th century. Their goal was to explore higher spiritual realms, but one ritual in particular involved summoning a powerful demon called Choronzon, known as the Dweller in the Abyss. This entity represents chaos, dispersion, and illusion. Basically, it's a force that tries to confuse and destroy the magician's sense of self. They set up in the desert sands near Bou Sada. Crowley drew a large magic circle for protection and a triangle outside it where the demon would appear. To make the ritual more intense, Crowley offered animal blood as a sacrifice to attract the entity. This was common in old grimoires but it's gruesome by modern standards. Newberg stayed inside the circle, armed with a magical dagger to observe, record everything, and keep the demon from breaking free. Crowley, acting as the vessel, stepped into the triangle and began chanting Enochian calls, which are special words and phrases meant to open portals to other dimensions. After some time, Choronzon manifested. It didn't show up as a typical horned demon. Instead, it took over Crowley's body and voice. The entity started speaking through Crowley, rabbling in a mix of truth, lies, and nonsense. It tried to trick Newberg by changing forms, first appearing as a sexy lady to lure him out of the circle, then as Crowley himself, claiming the real Crowley was the demon. It spouted philosophical gibberish, mocked their efforts, and tried to convince Newberg that reality was an illusion, and that he should give up the protection of the circle. The demon demanded worship and submission, threatening madness if they didn't comply. Newberg had to stay focused and use his dagger to reinforce the triangle's boundaries whenever the entity tried to escape or attack. The ritual lasted several hours, with Crowley possessed, rolling around in the sand, speaking in multiple voices, and even throwing sand to break the circle. Eventually, Crowley regained control, banished Choronzon with closing rituals, and they destroyed the triangle to end the summoning. Both men were physically and mentally drained. Crowley later said it was one of the most dangerous rituals he ever did, as Choronzon could have driven them insane or caused physical harm if the protections failed. The experience gave Crowley insights into the nature of the self and the universe, but it also highlighted how these entities can deceive and manipulate people. Choronzon didn't bother with truth. He mixed lies, half-truths, and philosophical flim-flam while trying multiple manipulation tactics: impersonation, reality denial, seduction, and threats of madness. This is just a more adrenaline-fueled version of what comes out of channeling lore, lacking subtlety as the present moment requires less. The demon doesn't need to be convincing about everything. It just needs to create enough confusion and fear that the victim either submits out of desperation or becomes too disoriented to maintain spiritual boundaries. Crowley and Newberg succeeded because they maintained obsessive focus on the circle's boundaries and used established magical protocol to contain the entity. Even occultists who deliberately invite demonic contact to recognize these entities as dangerous, deceptive, and shitty house guests. Despite this, mainstream spirituality treats psychic phenomena as benign and positive, as long as your vibrations are gluten-free or whatever. Crowley documented his ordeal because he wanted future hardcore magicians to know the stakes. But the New Age movement takes the exact same entities, removes the protective circles and banishing rituals, strips away the respect through fear framework, and packages demonic contact as safe consciousness exploration available to anyone with a meditation app. Choronzon tried to convince Newberg that reality was illusion, and that he should abandon his protections. Most demons are succeeding where Choronzon failed. They've convinced entire chunks of civilization that abandoning spiritual boundaries is enlightened, that skepticism toward demonic contact is fear-based thinking, and that inviting these entities leads to personal growth. Crowley at least knew what he was dealing with. Most people today have no idea. Sigillization. The occultist Austin Osman Spare, branded the father of sigillization by some grimy freaks, had some interesting thoughts regarding sigils in his 1913 book, The Book of Pleasure, Self-Love, The Psychology of Ecstasy. In the section on sigils, he states,
By sigils I have endowed fools with wisdom, made the wise fools, giving health to the sick and weak, disease to the strong, etc.
This directly indicates that the purpose of sigilization includes influencing or transforming other people or entities according to the magician's intent, such as imparting qualities, healing, or even harm. Speer's system is rooted in sympathetic magic, where sigils act as symbolic representations of desire that bridge the conscious will and the subconscious to manifest outcomes. This has influenced modern chaos magic practices, where sigils are sometimes placed on objects, images, or representations of others for ongoing projection of will. Alien exorcism on craft. In Carolyn's testimony from a legendary Doom Room X space, she describes her first and only fully lucid moment during her time on board a craft. Urged internally by what seemed to be an angelic or benevolent presence, she invoked the name of Jesus, which immediately expelled a demonic entity from the gray alien overseeing her. Though the alien didn't collapse into an inert shell afterward, it remained alert and responsive, alluding to the idea that these beings aren't hollow meat suits, devoid of any original consciousness, but rather living, biological hybrids, which can be, but don't require animation from possessing spirits. Gray aliens, thus likely other brands of Space Brothers, and obviously hybrids, represent engineered hybrid descendants of the biblical Nephilim, functioning as corporeal proxies for the disembodied souls of those ancient entities or their angelic progenitors, allowing them to interact with our physical realm under demonic influence. The hybrids are said to carry out more of the legwork in recent years regarding abductions and operations. I find it highly likely that they are not bound by them same metaphysical permission laws as the demonic, while unpossessed. This would make them ideal conduits for carrying out alien jobs, stripping away much of the invisible red tape operationally. This concept tracks with Whitley Strieber's communion accounts, where Greys exhibit eerie, individualized personalities that persist even after apparent disconnects. Baphomet's Meteor. Published in 1972, Baphomet's Meteor, by French science fiction author Pierre Barbet, pseudonym for Claude Avis, presents a slightly alternate history where the Knights Templar forge an alliance with an extraterrestrial entity named Baphomet. Stranded on Earth after his spaceship crashes, the demonic-looking alien provides the Templars with advanced technology, including atomic grenades, radios, and matter duplicators in exchange for food and resources. Under the leadership of figures like Jacques de Molay, the Templars use these innovations to conquer territories, amass wealth, and expand their influence across Europe before the rest of the planet, all while Baphomet secretly manipulates them to build a global empire he plans to seize upon the arrival of his rescue fleet. Divine visitations or holographic projections. Ingo Swann was a self-proclaimed alien contactee and psychic who worked for Stanford and the CIA in the 1970s. Some occultist dorks consider him the father of remote viewing. Swann was an artist too, though, and he painted pictures of his visions. In one painting, Swann depicts Mother Mary praying for the world as an asteroid approaches Earth and a nuclear bomb explodes. It seems Swann saw the apocalypse happening this way. though he did not view Mother Mary the same way a traditional Christian does. He believed the Marian apparitions that have occurred throughout history were actually holographic projections from a higher dimension of consciousness. He wasn't a member of any church. He was actually a Scientologist. Swan even helped L. Ron Hubbard develop the method of exteriorization, which is a kind of controlled out-of-body experience Scientologists learn how to do as they rise up the ranks and gain access to more secret knowledge. Shamanic death and dismemberment initiation. The accounts of shamanic lore are full of references attributing healings to helpful spirits, specifically ones they have initiated contact with for information on healing, and sometimes requesting direct intervention for a cure. One typically shamanic scenario is called death and dismemberment. This usually occurs before a shaman becomes recognized as such, and is part of the initiation rituals or during a time they are dealing with a serious illness. The man is visited by spirits, or sometimes self-declared ancestors, who seem to kill him, chop him up into little pieces, strip any flesh from his bones, and sometimes even eat him. Afterwards, they are reassembled, often with new elements integrated into their being, to them signifying spiritual empowerment. This can take place in the astral realm, visions, or dreams, all arms of the same beast. Though this is not exclusive to shamanic culture, as that is just the title generally attributed to occultists in Siberia. Yet there are many other practices by these various cultures which obtain the same result of spiritual enlightenment and various psychic abilities. Practices such as Kundalini Yoga, meditation, ECT can achieve the same thing, though not as quick, but don't require a traumatic or painful, or at least perceived as painful visions, meaning it's likely not the necessary element involved, but an experience decided by the entities which are interacting with a consenting practitioner, for some reason choosing a violent and traumatic vision to impress, which is purely symbolic, doing no physical harm. Once again, more evidence of their detailed control of our visions. Words of wisdom or confirmation. Bias. Father Seraphim Rose, born in 1934, was an American convert to Eastern Orthodoxy, who became a higher monk and co-founder of the St. Herman of Alaska Monastery in Platana, California. Before his conversion, he explored various philosophies and Eastern religions, including Buddhism, but ultimately found them lacking in truth. His journey led him to embrace orthodoxy in 1962, where he decided to live out the ancient patristic tradition amid modern secularism. Rose's writings, particularly his 1975 book Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, critiqued contemporary spiritual trends from an orthodox eschatological perspective, warning that they form part of a broader demonic strategy to pave the way for the Antichrist. Drawing on Scripture, the Church Fathers, and Orthodox saints, he argued that the end times would involve sophisticated deceptions designed to erode true Christian faith and promote a unified, false, global spirituality. Rose's prophetic insights, as outlined in his book and lectures, emphasize that the Antichrist would not appear as an obvious enemy of Christ, but as a subtle imitator, using small affirmers whose faith is superficial and external rather than rooted in the heart. He believed this deception would utilize phenomena that appear miraculous or otherworldly to draw people away from Orthodox Christianity toward a new religious consciousness, a blend of humanism, occultism, and pseudo-spirituality that promises personal evolution and global unity, but ultimately serves satanic ends. This aligns with biblical warnings in 2 Thessalonians 2:9-12, where the Antichrist's coming is with all power and signs and lying wonders, and Revelation 13:13-14, describing false prophets performing great signs to deceive humanity. Regarding Marian apparitions, Rose viewed many post-Great Schism, 1054, visions reported in the Roman Catholic tradition, such as those at Fatima, Lourdes, and Medjugorje, as potential demonic delusions rather than genuine divine interventions. In Orthodox theology, the Theotokos, Mother of God, is venerated greatly, but apparitions that push doctrines or messages diverging from patristic teaching, such as calls for ecumenical unity under Rome or new revelations, are suspect. Rose argued that these could be engineered by demons to farm false devotion and prepare Christians for the Antichrist's arrival, exploiting devotion to Mary to create a counterfeit spirituality that blurs the lines for less vigilant Christians. He suggested phenomena like solar miracles or mass visions of Fatima might involve telepathic suggestion or hallucination induced by aerial demons, drawing on Saint Simeon, the new theologian's caution against deceptive signs in the sky. This deception, he warned, would intensify in the last days, convincing even the elect into accepting a Messiah who unites religions under a banner of superficial peace. UFOs, in Rose's analysis, represent another layer of this grand deception, manifesting as modern adaptations of ancient demonic encounters. He described them not as extraterrestrial visitors, but as paraphysical entities from the aerial realm, the domain of fallen angels, as referenced in Ephesians 2:2, where Satan is the prince of the power of the air. Rose noted that UFO sightings and abductions often mimic spiritual experiences involving paralysis, psychic phenomena, and messages promoting a new age of enlightenment. He quoted researchers like Jacques Vallée, who saw UFOs as interdimensional rather than interstellar, but interpreted this through an orthodox lens. Demons adapting to secular, scientific worldviews to desensitize people to the supernatural and steer them toward a false gospel. The underlying message of these encounters, Rose claimed, is to prepare humanity for the Antichrist by fostering belief in benevolent saviors from space who will guide evolution into higher consciousness, echoing Saint Gabriel of Georgia's warning that end-times temptation would involve expecting salvation from the cosmos. This is synonymous with broader eschatology, where an event like this would condition society to accept global rule by a figure promising technological and spiritual advancement. False miracles and demonic wonders form the core mechanism of this deception, as Rose explained that Satan can imitate nearly every divine miracle to manipulate the less than discerning. Church fathers like Saint Ignatius Bryn-Chaninoff, he warned that demons can produce healings, visions, and prophecies that seem benevolent, but lack the rational purpose and truth of God's works. They are foreign to truth, filled with lies. In the charismatic movements, Eastern meditations, or occult practices he critiqued, these wonders often induce states of pre-list, spiritual delusion, where one mistakes demonic influence for divine grace. Rose stressed that true miracles stem from pain of heart and humility, not sensationalism, and serve to build faith in Christ, whereas false ones eroded by promoting self-deification or relativism. In the last days, he predicted, these would culminate in the Antichrist displays, convincing multitudes to worship him as a god. Ultimately, Rose saw these elements converging into a new spirituality, a post-Christian global religion blending sci-fi mythology, Eastern mysticism, and universalism into a humanistic smoothie that promises evolution into a different dimension of consciousness. This religion of the future would appeal to modern culture by offering immortality through technology, unity via relativism, and transcendence without repentance. But it is the Antichrist's counterfeit kingdom, demonic at its core, leading souls away from the cross. To resist these deceptions, Rose urged Orthodox Christians to cultivate discernment through wisdom, prayer, and sobriety, standing with the Church's unchanging tradition amid any chaos. His warnings remain as a call to vigilance in an age of spiritual confusion.